Going to bring Gordon on now and get this party started. All right. Well, it's ringing, folks. So it might take a minute. All right. Well, let's try back in just a second here. He's obviously not ready yet. Yeah, I've got a new setup now, and I have 3 monitors in my face. I've got one has a switchboard on it. One has chat room, news, and also I could pull things up now if I have to during the show, which is good. And then, of course, I've got the other screen has got the phone lines on it, so I could see everything. So, but I'm getting used to it nevertheless because it took me a while for 2. Now I got 3 screens. Okay, so here he is, and we're going to bring him on now. He just told me he's ready. Gordon, welcome aboard.
Oh, good evening, dear sir. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you back. How you been?
Oh, I've been really good, except for my eyesight suffering a little bit. I guess that's going to happen when you get older. That was the one part I didn't think would be defective.
Yeah, it's crazy because as you get older, me too now. I remember my father used to get little labels with small print and say, Mike, what's that say? I can't read it. And I used to love reading it for him because I thought, great, I got 20/20. Now, I have to have big font.
Yeah, well, it's the last couple of weeks. It's gotten to the point where you have one bad eye, and then I got one good eye, and the bad eye got worse, then it got better. So it's starting to get better, but it's basically like putting a sheet of crumpled cellophane over your left eye and walking around. And then my right eye, and that's been going on for a year and a half. So now I've worn out my right eye. So my right eye is like so tired it doesn't really want to focus on much. So I'm going to have to get like a 60-inch screen and hook it up to my computer. And when I write something, it's going to have to be with Microsoft Word with like 36-point text. It's like it's a joke.
Yeah. Well, the doctor will tell you eat more carrots. I don't think that's going to do it, though.
No, I don't know what's going to do. The doctor said, send an email to your family and see if anybody else has the problem. And I found 18 other members of my immediate family. Well, I'm Sicilian, so you can imagine there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And the 18 members wrote back and had left eye problems, but none had the problem I have. So that was like, okay.
Well, but I'll tell you, aging is an interesting process. I mean, I'm only 42 right now, but I could feel differences. The body doesn't want to do what it used to.
And I'm 65,
Yeah.
So listen, I was listening to your the first part of the show before I came on, so I'd be ready for what you were talking about. And I do have some definite comments. And then I've got some really interesting information. I know you're not going to believe in extraterrestrials till one lands in your yard, but they've landed in my yard. So you're getting it firsthand, right from the source. So don't forget that when you're contemplating what's going on.
All right, great. Well, I'm all ears. I want to hear
okay,
what's been happening.
The first thing that's interesting is that the God of the Bible was really selfish Anunnaki from Planet X, who created Adam and Eve, and then there was a lot of relatives. There were the king's 2 sons, Enlil and Enki, and Enlil was the bad one, and Enki was the good one. Enlil was put in charge of Earth, and he started making man for slaves to mine gold. And it's Enki that came along and said, "What are you guys doing? My brother has you as a slave." And his symbol, each brother had his own symbol. The symbol of the good brother was the serpent. So it's the serpent that told the Adam and Eve that they were slaves. So, but anyway, moving right along to that, as other members of the family came down and there were more and more people, they decided to each member of the family, as selfish as they were, should have their own city. So, like, you had the Sumerians, you had the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians. They each had their own god, which was a different Anunnaki. And of course, they were a little weird, marrying their sisters and creating weapons so they could go to war with the other cities. And there was some good stuff. They taught them how to make tools, but then they said, well, let's make a lot of weapons. And then they taught. But anyway, one thing that's really clear about these people is that different branches, when they took over, like let's say one branch invaded the other branch, they'd say, okay, you were all worshiping on a sun calendar. Now you're going to worship on a moon calendar. So now all the religious holidays would be lunar holidays. And if people aren't familiar with this, there's 13 full moons in one calendar year. Now, so the big issue is these blood moons, the 4 blood moons. And that does happen every so often, like every 500 years, you get a blood moon, which is where the moon goes into the shadow of the earth. The penumbra and the umbra are centered right on the moon. So in the center, you get this dark brown, and in the edges, you get this blood red. And so that's happening tonight. Now, you got a little confused, but I hate to tell you this, Michael. At midnight, it becomes the 15th. And right after midnight, at 1:46 in the morning Eastern time is when it starts.
That's what was confusing me, because I'm reading one story that says it's tomorrow. And yeah, I never put that together. It's my nights and days mixed together.
And if you hear whistling of the wind in the background, I easily have a 75 or 80 mile an hour wind up here, and a pretty heavy overcast, but I can just see this white spot. So after this broadcast is over at midnight Eastern, I'm going to pay attention to what's going on outside and see if there's any hope I can see it. But as you know, I studied astronomy and space science. I got a grant from the National Science Foundation when I was 15, so I'm pretty well versed in these subjects. And there's a couple of guys go, oh, this is beyond coincidence that these blood moons are occurring on the Jewish Passover and the other Jewish holiday, and they're like, beyond coincidence. Well, guess what? The last selfish Anunnaki king, who was known as Jehovah, he had a lunar calendar. So the Jews put all their events on the lunar calendar. And of course, a full moon is a full moon. So of course, there's a coincidence between Jewish religious holidays and these blood moons. But I'll tell you what, the moons came first, and the pasting a lunar holiday on top of that is what happened. So this is not something that's I heard on YouTube somebody go, he wrote a book, 4 Blood Moons or something, and it was quite a bestseller. And
I seen that too. Somebody had sent it to me, and for me, a lot of this stuff I think is easily explained, but some people just don't want to hear it.
Right. Well, see, what's odd is that there's such an exact passage through the center of the shadow. That's what's a little bit odd. That's what happens every 500 years. But you got this one tonight. Then the 6th full moon from tonight is the next one. Then the 6th full moon after that is the next one, and then the 6th full moon after that. And that happens only about every roughly 500 years. But if you look at Stonehenge, because there's all these circles, and they would move rocks from one pit to another, and they would mark the solar and lunar cycles. And that's because when one branch of the Anunnaki would take over Stonehenge, they go, okay, we're on the solar calendar, and they'd fill in all the lunar holes. Then when they were on the lunar calendar, they'd dig new lunar holes and fill in the solar holes. But they learned through doing that every 19 years, the things repeat. So let's say you had a solar eclipse today at your house. You would know that it's not exactly 19 years. It's something like 19 years and 3.5 months or something. But anyway, whatever it is, you can look it up. The exact thing happens again. So you could be like a magician. You could go, well, I don't like what you all are doing, so I'm going to create a total solar eclipse today. And you would have known that it happens every 19 years and 3 months or whatever it is.
Right.
And so that was a way of controlling people to know that.
Yeah, that's like the, what was it? We were talking about the locusts, the plagues, and things like that.
And I'm getting into that, believe you me.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you have technology and you could tell the weather or these things, I mean, my God, if I could go back right now, the things I could do. Just
Right, cicadas. That's what you mean. The 17-year cycle of the cicadas,
yeah,
not locusts.
yeah. So
Yeah. It'd be like time travel, and you go Well, I think I'm going to buy some IBM stock in 1955.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's you could see. Like I remember, I was telling a guy I was using Windows 1, which was ridiculous. It was crashing every 2 minutes, and I had just gotten this astrology program to figure out where the positions of the planets were, and I called the guy up and I said, "Listen, this Windows is the coming thing, and you got to write your program to run on Windows." And he goes, "No." And this was 1986. It was Windows 1. It was like, how many of your listeners even tried that or knew about it? So I called him up, and he goes, "No, I just spent 10 years writing it in DOS to run, on IBM PCs." And I said, "Look, I'm telling you." Microsoft is the coming thing because it's going to mix pictures and text. That's perfect for astrology. You do a chart, and then you calculate the aspects. I said, it's perfect. Do you think I went out and bought one share of Microsoft stock? Not that I ever had any money to invest in the stock market, nor would I today. But do you think I bought even one share? Do you know what that would be worth today? Probably a new car.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was just talking about this the other night. If I could, imagine going back in time, and really all I'd need to bring with me maybe is a book of matches, a Bic lighter, and I don't know, hell, give me a cell phone.
Yeah,
And
and
I
a
probably
notebook and
could convince people that I have now captured their soul in this little device and that they have to pay me to get it back.
Selfies. So, but what I want to tell you is that what's referred to, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with this. The last book of the Bible is called Revelation, and in there are prophecies. And also, there's another book that you can read online, and it's called the Colburn Bible. And that's a description written in ancient Egypt after the last pole shift that describes the next one. And it says the same thing that the last book in the Bible says, even though it's not the Bible. It's called the Colburn Bible, Kolbrin. The Colburn Bible just says the same thing that Revelation says, which is that the sun will be blotted out and the moon will appear blood red. Well, what I'm talking about tonight is the update on Planet X. And I've got some really exciting information, but the tail of Planet X, and Planet X is moving closer to the Earth. So instead of being like 34 million miles from Earth, now it's 30 million miles. And the tail is 5 million miles long, and it's streaming almost like a static electricity, electromagnetic thing, right towards the Earth. So that's why if you go to the American Meteor Society, AMS,
Oh, I think we lost him here. Let me get him back. Oh, I don't know what happened. It just cut right off. Let's get him back on here. Gordon,
what happened there? I didn't click anything. Did you?
No, I didn't click anything, and it's
those NSA guys again. Huh?
It just cut right off. I've never had that happen.
If there's anybody they don't want talking, it's me. And wait till I tell you some of the things that happened to me recently. So, anyway, if you go to the American Meteor Society, so I was saying, I hope you don't mind me giving the references to people so they can look this stuff up themselves, know?
Please do.
I'm not making this stuff up. You go to the American Meteor Society, AMS, and they have the list of how many fireballs have hit the sky in every year, going back. And a number of fireballs so far this year is like 1,000 of them. These are reported major burning objects coming in from the sky. And those are rocks out of the tail of Planet X. So there is stuff happening, even though, a lot of people are like, well, there seems to be a huge lull. And, what the heck is that all about? But anyway, so before pole shift actually happens, the tail is going to blot out the sun. There's going to be so much dust and gravel in the sky that the sun is going to be darkened. And looking through this red iron oxide dust that's ejected from Planet X because of their open rift volcanoes and trails behind them in the tail, which is now because Planet X has stopped, It's just in between Planet X and the Earth, 5 million miles from Planet X towards the Earth. That's going to make the moon appear to be red, but that isn't going to be on the full moon. In other words, anytime you can see the moon, you're going to look at it and it's going to be blood red. Then you know you've got pole shift happening at any time, okay?
And when would we be expecting this to happen?
Well, I want to get into that too. Like, how long could pole shift take from the plagues all the way up to the actual event? And what's really interesting is that Egyptologists found a calcite pillar that was shattered. And for some reason the other day, recently, they decided to glue it back together. And calcite's very brittle, and it's also soft, so you can scratch it with your fingernail. But anyway, it was a live weather report from the apocalypse, from the last pole shift. Can you believe that, Michael? It was like a newspaper, like if you went back to the middle of World War II and found a newspaper that was like live, it's not a live report, but it's at the time, it's current for that time. And this pillar describes how these falls of hail have stripped all the fruit off the trees, stripped all the leaves off the trees. The iron oxide has made the Nile flow red, and you can't even drink it because it's like sucking on a rusty iron pipe. And, of course, they didn't have artesian wells back then. And then all the crops in the fields were getting buried in hail, and they were getting crushed by hailstones. So already there was the collapse of society, and these other tribes that had been really jealous of the Egyptian pharaohs were getting restless and going, this might be a good time to invade Egypt and take it over, which is actually what happened after pole shift. So do you remember when the Jews were let go by Egypt? And the pharaoh had his gods and his magician, and they battled. This is what it says in the Bible. And Moses made the Nile River, run red, and there were all these things, and there were the plagues and the locusts and stuff like that. So that's what we're going through now. I mean, I can't tell you, the weekend before last, we had 10 below on Friday. Saturday we had 55 degrees and sunny. We've had 45 below. We had the polar vortex here in Maine. It's like living through, the end times. And so we had 55 degrees. Janet and I are like, well, we got to open all the doors and windows because that was like summer. I mean, that's 95 degrees warmer or 100 degrees warmer than it was in January and parts of March. So, of course, we opened all the doors and windows. Then Sunday, we had 5.5 inches of rain, which was like a deluge. And I live on a mile-long dirt road. And we went out and looked at it. And Janet's really good at making up words. And she goes, well, because we had a lot of snow on the ground, too. She goes, well, there's not only meltage, but there's ravinage because our dirt road started having all these ravines from the rain running down. Then that rain turned to freezing rain, coated everything with 1/4 inch of ice, then dusted snow on top of it. And, this is like in this period of 48 hours. And I'm like, boy, so I really feel like I can report that this is the weather conditions live from the apocalypse is going on now. I don't know what you've been having in South Carolina, but let me tell you, New England's really been hit hard with.
Is anybody telling you to build an ark? With all that
well,
rain?
I live on top of a mountain, so if they're building an ark, probably they want to float over this way.
But yeah, the weather has been crazy. I mean, we've been doing pretty well here now about the last week and a half. But before that, I mean, it's 70 degrees one day, it's 35 the next. So it's been crazy.
People in North Carolina told me they're getting like 1 inch of snow, 2 inches of snow, and the next day it's 70 degrees, and the goats are laying out in the grass. And
yeah. So this is everywhere. It's
now. I've been on your show quite a few times, and I do appreciate it, and I try and make it really interesting for everybody. And you're always, anytime you want to have me back, I'm always ready to come on your show because I think you got some really thoughtful listeners. And I know there's people that aren't going to believe probably half of what I say, but you have to really have something wrong with you if you don't believe the other half. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I've said on your show before that if I gave you a new pair of sneakers and put you down next to the pyramids and said, walk to the promised land, in other words, just pick a city like Jerusalem, how long would it take you? It would be under a week. That's how close the pyramids are to Jerusalem, you know? So how come, because you're familiar with this, and I'm sure most of your listeners that have read the Bible are familiar with this, the Jews wandered in the desert trying to find the promised land for 40 years. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yes, I do.
You've heard that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Now, so it took them. So first you had all these plagues, and the Pharaoh goes, oh, God, your God is stronger than my God. Your high priest Moses is stronger than my high priest. I'm going to let the Jews go because we're really tired of the hail, the windstorms, the lightning, not so much the rain. Then the volcano went off, Thera and Santorini, which put enough dust in the air that you couldn't tell where the sun was rising or setting. And 40 years go by, right? Now you're over in the Promised Land. Well, as everybody knows, the Promised Land wasn't empty. The Palestinians lived there, and they had walled cities. So Joshua was their general, and Moses was their spiritual leader. So Joshua had to take the Jewish army and attack all these walled cities, like the Jericho and this other stuff. So he wrote a book in the Bible too. You can go to the Old Testament and you can look up Joshua. And you look up Joshua and you get to chapter 10, and he's in the middle of a battle. Now remember, this is 40 years after the plagues and the falls of hail started, right?
Yeah.
40 years, because that's how long it took them wandering in the desert. Now you could say that Joshua and Moses were the worst leaders in the world. Like, don't put them in charge of directions, like a map wouldn't help those guys, it's almost embarrassing. If you could walk today that distance in under a week, how come these guys, who you would think would be the smartest guys in the world, would take 40 years? But nevertheless, they're in the middle of a battle, and all of a sudden, Joshua says, right in chapter 10, the sun rose that morning, did funny circles in the sky, and set in a new direction. And then he goes on to say, there never was a day like this before, and there'll never be a day like this again. Okay? Well, that shows you how much he knew. He didn't realize it was caused by Planet X and pole shift. But the reason why I'm saying this, Michael, is because from all of these plagues, the 10 plagues of Egypt, which is sort of what we're going through now, from that to the actual pole shift, which is where the sun did funny circles and set in a new direction, was 40 years. So, the Zetas said, and pictures from NASA SOHO, which I have sent you, by the way. You remember that, I hope.
Oh, yeah.
Planet X came through the inner solar system and came around the face of the sun in 2003, where it's basically came to a stop. And I've also discussed this on previous shows, that gravity pushes, it doesn't pull, and that's a 400-year-old lie that everybody's been taught. So Planet X came in 2003. Well, now it's 2014. So that's 11 years. But what if this pole shift takes 40 years? Well, that means we've got another 30 to go. So that would explain some of the lull, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it might. And when it comes to Planet X, I've never doubted ever that it was out there someplace. It's just
Right.
There's so much stuff that comes out about it, and people, especially these YouTubers, they go crazy with this.
I know.
And
I know.
And I guess it gets to the point where the boys cried wolf so many times, and that's why people sometimes just don't want to hear it. It's like, oh, there you go with that again.
Like you've heard me talk about Obama announcing it, how he's going to get together with the president of China, the president of Russia, and they're going to jointly announce the presence of Planet X and pole shift, and they're going to start making plans. But in Zetatalk.com, it says that the extraterrestrials told the president, either you announce it or we will. So I don't see any sign, and a lot of people have told me right from the beginning, when I first mentioned it, they said, I'll eat my hat if Obama announces that.
Well, I'll tell you what, they might want to introduce themselves before they announce Planet X if the aliens do it, because, most people will be shocked over that alone. just because.
Right. Well, what they said is if you don't announce it on a worldwide broadcast, jointly, all the three biggest nations on Earth, then we are going to create events the likes of which mankind has never seen before, and we are going to shock people in a way that will shock them right to their very core and change everything. So, and honestly, like there have been a lot of false starts. Like there were various things that we thought Obama was clearing the decks, like when he fired 5 generals in 1 week. What was that all about? Stuff like that. There were times when we thought, well, okay, he's really cleaning house and he's getting ready to announce it, and nothing's happened, and even Nancy Lieder's a little bit disgusted over that. So, but the thing is the message was, you announce it or we will. So basically what I'm saying is, wait for this other shoe to drop, because I'm pretty sure that that's the way it's going to go. Because unless I see something where it looks like Putin and Obama and the president of China are just buddy, and they're going to hold a joint press conference. But, I mean, just look at the recent events. I don't think there's any chance of that now. So I don't know. I don't
either, but I'll tell you, people must be really interested tonight because my website has crashed. So I've been trying to get back in it. It said the server's down. So, well, we're being heard. I mean, we're fine. The show's fine. But
okay.
As far as
you archive it, and then I think you've been putting it on YouTube too.
Yeah, absolutely. But now I've separated it because I get attacked sometimes. So I've separated my the computer that runs the show with the computer that goes to other stuff, and so apparently too much for the server on my website because it has crashed. So
exactly. Now, what I've said, and this is where I want to get into this personal stuff, because nobody else can tell you stuff like this, is Janet and I have had some really interesting stuff happen. Now, what I've said before is that there are 1,000 unselfish extraterrestrial races on Earth, and they've divided themselves into 40 working groups. And to avoid duplication of warning everybody what's going to happen and covering it with a screen memory. So you go to sleep at night, you go on board a saucer with people from your community, and then when you wake up the next day, you don't remember a thing, but you were told what's going to happen and what your soul choices are. And this is a giant lesson for Earth. Are people more important than possessions, or possessions more important than people? And this is not just a cataclysm or an apocalypse. Sure, we're going to have the collapse of governments, religions, economies, and banks. And the selfish and the elite are going to have to roll up their sleeves and garden like normal people and form unselfish, if they're even capable of it, unselfish survival communities. But there isn't anybody that's going to be allowed to go to Moon or Mars, even though they just keep talking about it. But that's just not going to happen.
Well,
so everybody.
I kind of think that if they do get these people together to send them to Mars, as they've talked about, I have a feeling that these people, for one, they're not coming back. For another, I think that all contact will probably be lost with them once they get there.
Yeah, and probably they won't be as happy as they thought they would, and they'll probably all kill each other or die anyway.
Yeah, or be used for some wild experiments. Like, well,
right. I've heard people go, "Oh, I would love to be on the first trip to Mars, even if I never came back." And I'm thinking, are you crazy?
Yeah, I know.
So what I've been saying is that the Earth itself is getting ready to graduate to another frequency. It's just like we're living on a radio dial, and we're at one level, and then you turn the knob and we go up a couple steps, and that's where these fourth dimensional extraterrestrials are, and the Earth is going to become a fourth dimensional planet. So when that happens, everybody that's here on the planet will become fourth dimensional also. But selfish people won't be able to handle that vibration, and they'll just incinerate like moths in a candle flame at night. They're just going to fly into the flame and burn up. They just won't be able to handle it. So this is a really important graduation, and this is the reward for all the unselfish people and all they've put up with from the selfish people. And that's the meaning in the Bible of the prophecy: the meek will inherit the earth. It's meek, meaning unselfish, not stupid, not victims, but the real active people that know what's going on. So you've got first of all, you've got the apocalypse, then you've got the graduation to a new frequency, and then you've got open contact with ETs from then on, because with no governments, no religion, no banks, no economies, and no rich people, you're going to have open contact with unselfish extraterrestrials, and then you're going to have all kinds of new medical breakthroughs. You're going to have new technology. You're never going to be looking for a car again. Probably you'll have a saucer that anywhere you need to go, here or even in the sky, it will all be possible. So this is a big scenario, and just this apocalypse part of it is just one part of it. But the part that I have personal evidence of and experiences recent that I want to tell you involves this people taking people up on saucers and telling them what's been happening. Now, you have to realize that my wife Janet and I live a less is more lifestyle. We heat with wood. We don't have any plumbing. We live on a mountaintop in the middle of the Maine coast, about 2 miles back from the salt water. And we've got a blueberry farm. And so they, like a lot of communities, they have these open mic nights. So Janet and I have gone to them, and we get there early enough so that we make sure that we can get 20 minutes. And so we go and sign up on the board, and everybody's wondering what the hell we're going to do, because everyone else is reading poems, and they're going to play a song that they wrote, or they're going to, a bunch of friends are going to play a couple of songs. So then my 20 minutes starts, and I stand up there with pictures of Planet X next to the sun, maps of the future flooding on Earth, talking about extraterrestrials and the change in dimensions, and then open contact with ETs. And I'm looking around the room. This is the usual thing that happens. So I look around the room, and there's let's say 150 people there, and 150 of them are smirking, sneering, snickering. And there's 3 people in the room that are nodding their heads yes. And then when I finish the end of the 20 minutes, Janet and I walk back up the aisle, and it's people are leaning away from us. You know what I mean, Michael?
Yeah.
And then we're go take our seats, and these 3 people come over to us, and they go, "Wow, you were really brave to say all that." And I said, "Well, I didn't really feel that I'm brave. I have to tell you, because I'm not selling anything. I don't have a website. I'm just so excited about telling everyone what's about to happen. But of course, if I'm 30 years off, am I going to live to see it? I'm 65. Imagine 30 more years. I'll be 95. Well, what the hell am I going to be doing with it?
Yeah.
I don't think it's that far off. I don't think it's tomorrow either, but still, these 3 people come up to me and go, "You are so right, and it's so important that you told everybody that." So that I want as the background for this first event. Now, just at the end of December, we had it really cold, and it would change. All of a sudden, it'd be warm, and raining and foggy. So it was 25 below zero on the 25th of December, and then the 26th. Janet goes to sleep the 26th, and she's thinking, and you're married, right? I mean, your wife might have these kind of thoughts. She's thinking, what would happen if Gordon were here? What would become of me? I mean, does your wife ever think, well, what would happen if Michael wasn't around?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, maybe she's thinking, trip to Vegas.
Yeah.
But anyway, she was having that thought. It was in a dream, and she's thinking, well, what would become of me? And all of a sudden, the Zetas broke right into her dream, and they said to her, plain as day, speaking telepathically to her in her dream, they said, "Janet, we're always with you, and the very next time you go outside, we will prove it to you." So she wakes up Friday morning, the 27th of December, and she's telling me this dream. We're having coffee, we're talking, and I'm like, wow, and meanwhile, this warm front has moved in. There's this heavy drizzle. There's a fog you could cut with a knife, and we're alone at the top of this mountain. And and it's a miserable day, and we're looking at how many pieces of firewood we had split, and we knew we were going to run out. And it's just a nasty kind of day where you don't want to go outside. And we just kept burning the last pieces of firewood. And finally, at 5 o'clock, Janet and I looked at each other and go, okay. And we have a wood splitter, and we put headlamps on, and we have rain gear. You know, it was a miserable day, and you'd be lucky if you see a car headlight at 100 yards, or definitely you wouldn't even know there was a light at 300 yards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So our door faces north. So she gets her clothes on first, her boots and her pants and her headlamp and everything. And she goes out and she's going to uncover the splitter, and we're going to try and start it with starter fluid and gas it up and stuff. And we have a big pile of logs that I had cut. So we're ready to get some firewood. And she rounds the corner to the east. So she goes out the door and she turns right. And as she comes around the corner, she's looking east, southeast, and that's towards the top of the mountain. And on the top of the mountain, we have a little cabin that's held down by a chain. I put a chain that comes out of the granite, goes over the peak of the roof where I put a piece of angle iron, and then back down the other side. And that cabin would not even still be there if I hadn't done that. And I'm telling you, if you hear whistling in the background, it's because we have a 75-mile-an-hour wind going on right now. So this is definitely a windy spot. So she rounds the corner, she looks up there, and she goes, "Gordon, quick, come out. Most unbelievable. There's a huge red ball over the top of the mountain." And she goes, "Get out here." And I'm like, I hadn't put my boots on yet, and I was trying to zip up I have those Dickies work pants, that I wear, and I was trying to get those over my boots, and I've got spiked boots because they don't want to slip because there's still snow and ice on the ground, even though it's foggy and drizzly. So I'm like, and she's go, "Oh my God." And she goes, it's blood red. It's a red LED, like those stoplights that are just the most beautiful red.
Yeah.
And she goes, "It's huge." And I get out the door and I turn the corner, and just before I turn the corner, it winks out. So it was just for Janet, not for me, not for anyone else. And there's no way that she could have, that anyone else could have seen it, because we're so far from everybody, and the fog was so thick that how could you possibly, have that happen? So we're like, wow.
Yeah.
So
I know when I had my last sighting, it was just incredible, and my wife was able to see it because I banged on the outside of the house, and she got out just in time to see it leaving. But fascinating stuff, and people don't believe. I can't twist their arms, but
right. Well, there's a lot more going on than most people would think there is. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
So you have to understand that Janet and I have been together 24 years, and she's one of 9 children, and the other 8 think that we're nutcases or something. Like they've told Janet, "Look, the whole purpose of life is to be born, go into business, make money, and then you die, and that's all there is to it." And we're always telling Janet, and she was like the black sheep of the family. They're saying, "Why are you asking these questions about the meaning of life? What's the point of it?" And there were even a couple of her siblings who said, "You see that shotgun over in the corner? Why don't you just save us all a lot of trouble and kill yourself?" So they weren't even nice about it.
Okay. Well, hold your thoughts right there, Gordon. We've got to take a quick break, and then we'll might have an update for us at some point. Gordon, we're back, my friend, and wherever you would like to go, I know you were.
I want to add something. If you don't have the money, and look, I'm on Social Security. I live month to month, so I know what it's like. And but the least you can do if you're listening to this show and it's exciting for you, then call up 5 of your friends and say, "Listen, there's information here you're not going to get anywhere else. And this is a rare opportunity to be able to enjoy this." And, maybe when you call those 5 people, they'll call other people. And then there will be some people who have some money. And because there are a lot of people that do have money who feel guilty if they're not supporting their beliefs and putting their money where their mouth is. And And so maybe you know some people like that that are capable of donating. But anyway, what I'm saying is talk it up. That can only help all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's pretty much how we've gotten where we are now is word of mouth. And, I think if I had to explain this show in just one sentence, we're about the truth. That's it. There's nobody,
Right.
no paychecks being got here. So, I mean,
Right.
I do this. This is my time. I don't have no producers whipping me from behind. And so we do it the right way. And
Right.
so, hey.
Right. So now I've said, and if you're familiar at all with people that have been going up and met extraterrestrials, a lot of times they can't handle it. Now I can handle it because I grew up interested in it, and I've had experiences since I was a child. Like I grew up with my parents are divorced. I lived with my mother. My brother and I each had our own bedroom. My mother had her bedroom, and we lived 7 miles from the nearest traffic light, 7 miles from the nearest stoplight. Or street light. We were way out in the woods in Connecticut, and we would all three of us wake up simultaneously to the house being bathed in a white light, like being in the center of Yankee Stadium at a night game. And this was not like one of us woke up and said to the others, come on, there's this huge white light, let's go see what it is. Instead, we were like wide awake. Well, I didn't realize that was like a screen memory. It was a pleasant memory. I mean, it wasn't like super enjoyable, but it wasn't adverse at all. We'd wake up simultaneously, and I didn't realize at that time, and that was because we as a group, my mother and my brother and I as kids, had been up on a saucer getting instructions and learning things and then come back. But they allowed that little bit of consciousness. The rest of it was a screen memory. So we thought we'd been asleep, but there's the house bathed in white light. So my brother and I go tearing down the stairs, throw open the front door. My mother's room was right near the bottom of the stairs. So she'd join us and we'd all rush out onto the lawn and it'd be total darkness. And this kept happening over and over and over again. And I never could put it together until, much later in my life. And a lot of people have had these experiences where they may, remember that they saw an owl. And that's a very common. And also sometimes kids will go, the mother will go, where were you? And the kid will go, well, I saw a big-eyed deer and I followed it into the woods and I don't know where the last hour went to. And so there are these what they're called screen memories. And they're like to be a trigger so that it's there consciously, but you can't access it yet because you can't handle it. But as I lived my life speaking out on these subjects with a tremendous interest in this, my father was interested in it, and later my mother, brother, and I saw a mile diameter mothership materialize over San Juan Harbor and launch 3 saucers out the side of it. So, then I started putting this stuff together. But so anyway, you're going to love this story. Okay, now I was talking about Janet as the black sheep. In 24 years we've been together, I think that one or more of her siblings have called her like, I don't know, 3 times in 24 years. And so I'm like, Janet, I'm Sicilian. You should really try and be close to your family regardless. And so if there's ever anything going on, it's because Janet called up and found out what it was, not because they called us up and said. In fact, her mother is now passed away. Her mother used to say, the whole family was here for a wonderful Christmas party. Do you think they called us? No, they didn't want us talking about saucers or something. So she has a sister, Nancy. And Nancy has a cabin on a lake north of where she lives. And in the winter, it's just a desolate area. And her husband has a snowplow, and they plow their way in. And they stay in this cabin. It's right on the lake, and it's as big as a postage stamp. And upstairs is one room. So when you go up the stairs, that's the bedroom. And there's a peak of the roof that faces the lake, and it's glass all the way up to the peak. And the bed is lined up so when you're laying in bed, you could look out at the lake. So now you understand.
Nice.
So Nancy has never called us ever to say anything. So. That night, after Janet saw the big red mothership, she had this dream that she was in this really fancy hotel, which she knew was the inside of a flying saucer. or a mothership or something. Huge room. It was sort of like a ballroom. It was like technologically beyond anything you can imagine, all brand new. And her sister Nancy was there with a whole bunch of her friends from Southwest Harbor, Maine, a lot of them. And in the middle were a whole bunch of extraterrestrials. And they're all talking to Janet and the friends. And Nancy, and Janet kept going, Nancy, come over here and listen to this. And Nancy's like, oh no, this is, and she's like going around the room and touching everything. And she's just marveling over the technology, and she's just fascinated. And she can't spend 2 seconds to find out what these extraterrestrials are trying to say. She's just fascinated with the room. So Saturday morning, we wake up, and Janet remembers every drop of every dream. So we're having coffee, and she's saying, I had a dream last night that the extraterrestrials took a whole bunch of people from where I was born in Southwest Harbor, including my sister Nancy, and had them all on a saucer. And Nancy was totally interested in the technology, and she wasn't paying any attention to what they were saying. But all of her friends were very interested in what the extraterrestrials were saying. So I'm like, wow, that's quite a dream, you know? So we're sitting there having the coffee, and she just finished saying that, and all of a sudden the phone rings, and it's Nancy. And Nancy goes, oh my God, did you see that full moon last night? She goes, I woke up and I'm looking out the window and I see this gigantic full moon, and I shook my husband over and over and over again, wake up, wake up, wake up. And he just wouldn't wake up. Well, he's a nice enough person. I guess he's like most people, but he's sort of a deadhead about anything beyond, you know, what's right in front of him with his work and his house. So, he's not really interested in much. And she's shaking him, and she can't wake him up because she wanted to wake him up and go outside and look at this full moon because it was so gorgeous over the lake. And she goes, so I couldn't wake him up, so I decided to lay back in bed. So I rearranged the pillows, and I'm got my head on the pillows. I'm looking out the glass, and I decided to rearrange the comforter. I'm patting the comforter, and each time I patted the comforter, these little sparkles came out of the comforter and filled the room with little sparkles of light, all different colors, and it was beautiful, mostly silver and gold. And she goes, and that's why I'm calling. She goes, I know Gordon's kind of scientific. Does he have a Geiger counter? And oh, God. So Janet hands the phone to me. And I said, Nancy, and she goes, do you have a Geiger counter? I think my comforter, you know, it's from China. I think it's radioactive. You know, could you bring the Geiger counter over to my cabin and see if the comforter is radioactive? And I said, Nancy, are you aware of the phases of the moon? Well, her husband's a lobster fisherman. She damn well ought to be. But she goes, well, a little bit. And I said, well, are you familiar with the fact that at the full moon, the moon is on the opposite side of the Earth, and that's why you see it at night. But on the new moon, the moon is next to the sun, so when the sun sets, you don't see the moon. And she goes, yeah, what are you getting at? And I said, well, guess what, Nancy? Last night was the new moon. There was no moon in the sky. I said, what you saw was a flying saucer. And Janet had a dream that you were on a flying saucer with all of your friends, but you weren't paying attention to what the ETs said. She goes, no, the comforter is radioactive. I said, Nancy, don't you realize that was a really pleasant memory? You saw the big white light of the full moon, then you patted your comforter and the room filled with lights. This is to give you a screen memory so you don't remember the exact details. Because after all, Michael, if some of these people remembered this stuff, they'd have to change their everyday life. And you would too, you know. And even tonight before the show, I asked the ETs to contact you, and I've asked them every time I've been on, and I don't know when, if they're ever going to do that. But if there's somebody I'd like to have, and you have seen saucers and strange lights, so
I have, and you know that's something I was going to bring up. I wonder why. You know, I've had close visual encounters, I would say, and you know, I'm all open for it if they want to talk to me. You know, I've got space in the driveway. I mean, really.
Right. So I told Nancy, look, you were on a saucer last night with your sister, and you were meeting extraterrestrials, and you were finding out what's going to happen in the future. She goes, well, I don't think you're right. She goes, I'm going to call Lorraine, which is another sister. So she calls up Lorraine, who's in Florida. And she says, Lorraine, I think my comforter is radioactive. And Lorraine goes, well, was it cold last night? And Nancy goes, oh, yes, it was very cold. Because after that night of drizzle and rain, then the next night was crystal clear, but it was probably 10 below zero, And Nancy goes, yes, it was very cold. And Lorraine goes, well, it was static electricity. And Nancy goes, oh, yeah, that's what it was. So case closed. You know what I mean, Michael? Case closed.
Case closed.
Yeah. So, okay. Let me see here.
So let me ask you this. Why do you suppose that they're contacting you to give you this information? And what do they want you to do? They want you to spread it?
Well, that's the thing is Janet and I, against all odds, have been going out and speaking to the community, signing up for this open mic. And people think I'm going to read a poem or something, And then they're not pleased, I guess, when I start talking about this stuff because they're thinking, well, that's really wild, You know how people are. If Harvard, if the president had said there were extraterrestrials or if somebody from Harvard said it was proved, then they would believe it. But when little old me says it, I can't possibly be bright enough to know anything about this. So why would they believe me? And so wouldn't it be natural that if they're having these community meetings, that they would have Janet and me up on the saucers when these people are beamed up and they're there, we go, look, this is what we were telling you about. What do you think now? Here's real live extraterrestrials. And now they're going to tell you what's coming. And, it just seems like that would be a natural thing, right?
Yeah.
So okay. Now, a lot of times Janet has to go to Ellsworth, Maine, like once a week. So a lot of times I go with her, but it was right after that I decided to stay home, and it was heavily overcast but bright, and there was no wind. You could hear a pin drop, and I usually have the TV on loud because I'm watching the news, but I had turned it all the way down, and I'm reading the paper. I'm laying on the couch. It's very, very quiet, and of course we've had a lot of snow this winter, and the way we clean up the yard, instead of shoveling a path, we have a Kubota tractor, so we drop the bucket, lift the tractor up so all the way to the tractor's on the bucket, and we drag it backwards and scrape down as hard as we can. And we never get to the dirt. It's just, an inch or 2 inches of packed snow and ice. And then we walk in the yard. We all have different shoes and stuff. And there's a little, like a 16th of an inch of powder on top of the snow. But there's so many footprints that we made, let alone people that we invite over and stuff like that. It wasn't like we took a broom and brushed it every 5 minutes to see if anybody was walking in our dooryard, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm laying on the couch, and also, it's so quiet up here on the mountain that if a truck turns off the highway, I can hear them a mile away. So, and then if it's a car, I can always hear them by half a mile. The only ones I really can't hear are like a Toyota Prius, which, because it's half electric. Priuses have snuck up on me, and I didn't know anybody was here until I heard the door close. They opened up their door, got out, shut the door. So I'm laying on the couch, and I'm just, I'm reading the newspaper, and all of a sudden I hear a crunch. Well, I don't know, a lot of you that lived in cold climates know that when you have a certain temperature below zero and you walk on the snow, there's not only this crunchy sound, but there's also like a squeak.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Oh, very much. Rochester, New York, man.
Oh, okay. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes, sir.
So I hear this footstep 50 feet away out on the other side of the driveway, and it's coming towards the door, the glass door on the north side of the house. Now, right in front of the door, I have a granite door stone that I cut myself. It's 3 inches thick, and it's 4 feet by 3 feet. And we keep that clear, and that's right. Even if we have to pour boiling water on it, we'll keep it clear. And it's right in front of the glass door. So I hear this footstep, then I hear another footstep, and it sounds like somebody with my height and weight, because it would take that many steps to get to the doorstep from across the driveway. And I hear it crystal clear, crunch, crunch, crunch. And I'm like, wow, this person's going to be at the door any second. Where did they come from? So I stand up and I walk right to the door, and I get to the glass door at the exact moment that the footsteps stop at the door stone. And I look out the glass door, and there's nobody there. Nobody. And I open the glass door, and I step out into the doorstone, and there's nobody there. And then I walk out into the dooryard, and there's nobody there. Then I go out into the driveway. Now I can see 200 feet in all directions, and there's nobody there. And I was like, man, I should have had like a 20-foot bamboo pole to wave around me like a samurai sword to see if there was an invisible man there. And of course, I don't know if your listeners are familiar with this, but you can go to YouTube and you can enter Invisible Man, and you can see videos of men in the government invisibility suits becoming visible. And the most famous is this scene in Iraq, and there's a road going from the lower left to the upper right, and on the left side in the upper left-hand corner is a tank, and on the right side they circle it in red, and there's this little shimmery, and it's not a person or anything, it just looks like the background, but it's moving a little bit, and the shimmer moves and it crosses the road, and when it gets right in front of the tank, bingo, there's a U.S. soldier, and he climbs up on the tank. It's a really famous video. It's probably been out for about 10 years, okay? And so I have a friend I have a lot of friends that are psychics, but I called up this one that I thought would be the best for this, and I said, what in the hell was that? And she goes, it is driving the government absolutely nuts that saucers are over your house every single night. And they thought that you had left with your wife, and they were going to come to the door and pick the lock and go in and see if you have any special transmitter or some sort of a device that contacts extraterrestrials, which I assure you, Michael, we don't know we're doing it, so how would we have a device that does it,
Well, maybe the government has that type of device, and they think you've got your hands on it.
Well, you talk about NSA and all this stuff, and it's really funny too because they would have been a lot better off if they drove up in the car, and I would have said, "Look, we're about to have the collapse of everything the life the way you know it on Earth, and there's unselfish extraterrestrials that are interested in helping people because we're about to change dimensions, and when we do that, then we're going to be on their frequency. So it's like, dead people are at a frequency below ours, so we don't see dead people. But there are some people who can see ghosts. And then these unselfish extraterrestrials are on a frequency above ours, but there are some people that can see them. And my wife Janet is one of them. And I can hear them. Like if they talk to me, I can hear it in my head. And that's happened before. So, and I also can hear dead people too. Sometimes I've had people that died talk to me and give me messages and stuff. So it's, and I realize that for some of you, if this has never happened to you in your life, you don't know whether to believe this or not, and maybe you don't believe it. But I'll tell you this, just ask the extraterrestrials for contact, because that's the first prerequisite. If you don't make a call to have contact, they're banned. There's like a rule here on Earth. They can't contact you unless you ask for it. So that's the first thing. And of course, I always say it's the same up there as it is down here. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you certainly don't want to meet the bad or the ugly. You only want to contact the good ones. And I've said many times that if you're like attracts like, so if you're an unselfish, kind, empathetic person, the selfish ones aren't going to contact you, because what are they going to do with you? Nothing. And the unselfish ones, of course, are going to be the ones to contact you. And if you're really selfish and you put out the call, the unselfish ones aren't going to contact you, but guess which ones are going to contact you? The bad ones. So like attracts like, and whatever you're like, that's what you're going to attract. So I found that really interesting, because this goes along with that we're going in these meetings with the community, and somehow the government would know that and then send an invisible man up here thinking, well, we don't know if he's home or not, but we think he left, and we're going to come in and spy on his house, or who knows what they were going to do, But, well, really, if they want to know the truth, all they got to do is knock on the door and introduce themselves, and I'd be glad to tell them. And that goes for all you little government agents listening to this radio broadcast too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next incident is really interesting. Now, we've seen this older guy, and he has what's clearly, we've never talked to him or his child, so we don't know that the child's autistic, but to us it appears clear that the child's autistic. We see him around town, There's a big grocery store 7 miles away, and that's usually where we see him, in that town. And he's always holding his kid's hand really strongly. It's like if he ever let go, maybe the kid would run out in the street, looking at something and not notice a car and get run over. So to be safe, he's always gripping this kid's hand. So we go to the grocery store to go shopping, and Janet comes in the door and she gets a cart. Well, it's like the holiday season, and years ago there was nobody in Maine in the winter, but gradually these multimillionaires have built mansions, and then now they're starting to come up here and spend holidays here. So the grocery store was packed. It was shoulder to shoulder. And Janet comes in, and she notices 50 feet away through the crowd is this father holding the kid's hand, this little boy. And he probably looks like he's maybe 7 years old, right? And the kid takes one look at Janet, wiggles free of his father, puts his arms out like to have Janet pick him up and hug him, comes running to Janet, and you can see on his face that he's trying to form sentences. And the sentences we can imagine that he's trying to form are, I remember you from the flying saucer. Take me back. It was so much fun. I'm coming over. Take me and let's go. And one thing about autistic children is they're very single-minded. Whatever they think about, they think a lot about that, and they don't have a lot of different thoughts, and they're not socialized. So this is very unusual for an autistic child to run towards somebody with their arms out because they're happy to see them. So Janet stands there in shock, and this kid's running towards her with his arms out, and he's trying to form these sentences, and the only thing that comes out, Michael, over and over and over again is owl. Owl, owl. And he takes long enough to form another sentence, and he goes, owl. And it's like he knows in his mind what happens. He remembers it, and he wants to do it again, but the screen memory keeps popping in and blocking it, and the only thing he can say is owl. Amazing. So he comes running over. He jumps up into Janet's shopping cart and sits there facing her like, come on, let's go. Take me up on the saucer again. And the father comes running over, and he grabs him, and he goes, I'm really sorry. I don't know what happened. I don't know why he's doing this. And he goes, I'm really sorry. And he grabbed the kid and turned and was lost in the crowd again. So isn't that pretty interesting?
It is. It is interesting. Now,
and see, that's an additional confirmation without Janet doing anything about it. I mean, we're just going shopping in the grocery store, and this kid's running at her saying, owl, 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 which is the single most famous screen memory in UFO literature and culture, and people that, meet people that have had experiences. That's a very common screen memory.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people would probably ask, well, how come I don't see them? How come they don't make contact with me? Now,
but how do you know?
That's just it. I think a lot of times people overlook it. I could make no mistake. I don't know. This is what I don't get, Gordon. I don't get.
Well, you're really an advanced person, and look at your radio show and look at the content of it. I mean, do you really think that that's because you're just dazed and confused, and you ended up on these subjects, and you really don't have a clue? Or do you think that deep in your conscious mind, buried under layers of screen memories, you know exactly what's going on, and you're trying to bring it out?
Yeah, I feel like I've been pushed into this. I mean, as a child, I had all kinds of paranormal stuff, and then these UFO sightings, and it's all directed me to this show, really. I mean, I don't know. I've had more experiences than I feel I deserve. I wish that everybody could have at least one.
Right.
I've had quite a few.
Well, in my initial reaction, Janet and I have had over 3 dozen. I've seen no two ships the same. I've seen discs with pontoons on the bottom that were 150 feet across that looked like it could land in the middle of the ocean and float away. I've seen a top hat like Abraham Lincoln's top hat. We've seen needles. We've seen triangles. We've seen cigar-shaped ships. We've seen discs. And we've had them in our yard. And we've had ETs in our yard. And we've had ETs in our house. So, if you don't want to believe it, at least listen to what I'm saying and file it away, and something might happen. So last weekend, Well, the first weekend in every month, the library has a book sale, whatever books that people aren't taking out anymore and they want to sell them and get room for some more books. Whatever their process is, I'm sort of clueless to that. But anyway, so Janet goes to the book sale because she has a 2-year-old grandson. And he lives, a couple hours away. And when she sees him, she likes to give him some really nice children's books. So they had a children's book section, and there was this one book, and it's really famous. Your listeners would have no problem finding it, and it's called The Owl and the Moon. And it's beautifully illustrated, and it starts out that it's a cold winter night, and this young boy asks his father if they can go find the owl. So they go out in the moonlit night in the snow, and they go deep into the forest, and there's a clearing, and then they see this owl. And the illustrations are gorgeous. They're not the best ever, but they are gorgeous. And it's like all takes place at night in the woods where it's snowy. And so as Janet's flipping through the book, she comes to this full-page close-up illustration. I mean, it's like 24 inches wide and 15 inches high of this owl on a branch with his eyes. And she stops there and she's looking at this owl. And this young mother comes from across the room and she goes, are you thinking of getting that book? And Janet goes, yeah, for my grandson. And the woman goes, well, my daughter loves this book, but I'll tell you what, she always asks me to read it to her. But when we get to this page with the full page picture of the owl, she goes, she will not let me turn the page for 20 minutes each time. Mm-hmm. So, these things you could say, well, I made them up, or the series of circumstances. You could say that, there's a lot of things you could say, but really, I mean, does it sound to you like it's made up? Does it sound to you like it couldn't happen or it didn't happen?
Well, for me, I always, unless I have proof that you were telling a lie, I mean, for me, it's possible, and I have no reason not to believe you. So, and you've always been straight up with me. And again, good point. You're not selling books. You're not selling DVDs. You're not doing any of that. You're just coming on and telling your story. So I don't see any reason to not believe you. Although, there's going to be people who find it hard to believe, and that's okay. I mean, I'm not going to twist arms. It's, everybody...
Well, I think there's some sort of a rule that skeptics have to be allowed. In other words, this is a sole choice. You're either ready to move on. Wasn't there a movie years ago, Newsroom or something, where people open up the window and yell out, "I'm not going to take this anymore"?
Oh yeah, old movie too.
Well, the Zetas say that the average person takes 1,000 lifetimes of doing the same stuff over and over and over again before they finally get tired and they go, sort of like that Jack Nicholson movie, is this all there is? And then they discover that the answer is something they never considered, which is like a secret door hanging in the air in front of your face. And you open it up and there's a fork in the road. And if you take one side, you organize all your intentions, your behavior around being unselfish, service to others. And if you take the other fork, you organize all your behavior around being service to self and selfish. So whichever one you choose, and to choose the selfish, you have to be 90% selfish. And believe me, every time you have another one of these mass shootings or mass slaughters, I mean, I couldn't believe the slaughter in China with the swords. They killed, I forget how many people with swords. I mean, so it isn't just a matter of what weapon you have. There's people that are going to do this. Probably if they only had poison, they'd use poison. I mean, there are really evil people around. There's no doubt about it. But if you choose the unselfishness, you only have to be unselfish the majority of the time, at least 51%. And that means you have empathy and you believe in the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto yourself. So when you go to do something, you're sitting there thinking, how would I feel if this happened to me? And you use that's called your conscience. You use that to determine your behavior. And at that point, you're ready to graduate to the next level. So this level that we're in now, which I'll call the third dimension, some people call it the fourth, so therefore the next one would be the fifth, but I call the next one the fourth. So we're on the third. And the rule for the third dimension is selfish and unselfish are allowed to mix 100%. So you have this planet Earth with every time a good person does something really beautiful, a selfish person comes along and tries to figure out how to ruin it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, before we move on any further, let me ask you a couple of questions that have come from the chat. One is, have you been allowed to take any pictures of any of the sightings or any of the encounters?
Once my wife and I got a picture, and it was really funny because it was right where we live now, and we came up here 5 years before I even knew that I could ever buy it. It wasn't for sale. A banker in France owned this property, and he was going to build a house. And so we just came up here because it was a beautiful fall day. And I said, and Janet had a license plate. It said Jan-ET. So I said, let me take a picture of you with the view in the background. It was a beautiful fall day. And we went up there and we were holding hands and we're saying, I know it's ridiculous to ask a spaceship to stop what they're doing and come and show themselves to us, but that is what we're asking. So we're holding hands. We even said the Lord's Prayer. I mean, we're not religious at all, but we like that prayer. So we said that, and nothing happened, you know. So then finally I got out, and this is back in '94 when really great digital cameras hadn't come out yet. So I said, let me take a picture of you with your car license plate and your truck and the view. So I'm looking through the camera, and she's standing there, and it's a beautiful fall scene. I take the picture. I don't see anything. And so then we spend another hour holding hands and looking at the view and saying, if there's any extraterrestrials out there, please come. And then 3 weeks later, we finish the roll, we get it developed, and right there in the sky above Janet's head is a heel-shaped, triangular-shaped flying saucer, motionless, metal, reflecting the sun, and shaded exactly like everything else. And there it is. And we looked at that negative under a microscope, and it's a real object in the sky above Janet's head. So either they have a great sense of humor, and they timed it so that they were only visible during the 125th of a second that the camera took the picture, or else it was there all along and we didn't see it, which I can assure you that wasn't an option. So that's the only picture we ever got. Another time I had a saucer go directly overhead, and I was a professional photographer in New York and LA, and I had a Nikon, I had Tri-X film, I had my own darkroom, and it passed directly overhead on a full moon at night. It was black, and it had spotlights on the bottom of it, just about the same intensity as car headlights. And it was probably about 20 feet in diameter, and it passed directly over where because I saw it coming from a long distance away because I was up on this ridge in Maine, and I pulled over, got out, and I go, oh man, I brought my camera with me. And of course, so I opened the lens wide up, I'm tracking it with my hand, and I mean, I'm really good at that. Let me just say that. And so I can take 2 or 3 pictures in a row, and you would think that I used a tripod, but that's how good I am at holding. So I'm tracking the saucer, shooting all these pictures, then I go home and develop the film. I even push it because I'm going, well, all I want is the spotlights, you know, because it's black against a starlit sky, and the full moon's over in the side. So, you know, there's not going to be a lot to see. I couldn't see any detail, but I could plainly see it was a 20-foot diameter black disc. So I shot all these pictures. Those are the only frames on the film that were blank. Wow. And then there's other times where Janet goes, there's a saucer in the yard. I'm like, no, it must be the Northern Lights. You know, me, the great skeptic. And she goes, no, there's a saucer in the yard. And I go out, and sure enough, there's a 30-foot disc. It's nickel colored. It's ionized orange around the body of it. And then it's like a canoe on a lake. It's rocking slightly. And as it rocks, you can see this dome on the top, and that's nickel, but it's ionized in the air around it bright red. And it's just sitting there about 5 feet above this 20-foot maple tree right in our yard. And did we think to go get a camera? No. And I mean, it was just like awe-inspiring. You're looking at that, and you're going, wow, there are extraterrestrials. They do care. They came to visit us, and here they are in our yard. I mean, you can't, I don't know how anybody could be frightened of that. I mean, to me, it was like almost like a spiritual experience. It was awe-inspiring. It was something I'll never forget. And that was the first time that happened when Janet and I first got together we got together in the fall of '90, and that was in June of '91.
Fine.
June 9th, I'll never forget it. So, we've had these things happen, and that's the thing. Seeing is believing. I mean, if I were making this up, it'd be like some sort of a script or something, and I don't think I'd sound as excited as I am. But these things are really exciting, really exciting. So I don't know who has what control over what, but now I know that you're very skeptical of Nancy Lieder, but I've become very close friends with her, and she has as much of a hard time with the Zetas telling her stuff too. They told her in 2003 that pole shift could happen at any time, and she believed it to the point she went out and got some credit cards and bought like $40,000 worth of stuff, going, well, I got to put away some stuff here because pole shift's going to happen anyway. And she's in Wisconsin, so she didn't feel she needed a bug out bag to leave. She was going to like stock up. And the government believed that. And they had CIA agents, like she'd go out the door on one side of the house and a CIA agent would open the window over the kitchen sink and crawl into the kitchen on the other side. And they would notice, wow, she really is buying all this stuff and she's really ready for pole shift. So we ought to tell President Bush. So the Zetas said, well, that was a white lie to fool President Bush into going to Iraq early, because his plan was to capture all that sweet oil in Iraq just as pole shift happened, and then the rich and the elite would have all the oil they need. I have no idea what all of his plans were, but
right. And
anyway.
Well, the truth is, with me, it's like I don't know. I stay skeptical with everybody until, like you, I've talked with you enough where I can honestly say you believe what you're telling me, so I have no reason to not believe what you're telling me. But then there's others that are put out there who they're either selling something or trying to sell a lot of stuff.
Well, I mean, I admit, if you look up Nancy Lieder, there's some of the worst things you could ever say about anybody, and even write in Wikipedia.
Look up any of us, and you'll find bad stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But like I often say, if I woke up in the world and everybody thought I was the greatest thing since sliced bread tomorrow, I think, wow, I'm in the Twilight Zone or something,
Yeah.
So, but anyway, and she has asked the Zetas about Janet, and she goes, Janet's the real deal. Janet has been working with the Zetas all of her life, and she used to get pregnant. She'd be pregnant for about 6 weeks, and this is after she had her tubes tied. And she would get pregnant for about 6 weeks, and she would have a dream of these long-necked horses. She's on a medical table. They're implanting a fetus that's half Zeta, and Zetas are 100% human, and into her and half her. And they've been going around picking the most intelligent and emotional people because they made a mistake of cutting out sex. They clone themselves so they don't need to have sexual reproduction. They cut out emotions. They decided the way to go is telepathy. They created these big telepathic brains. And then all of a sudden their cloning is failing. And at the same time, don't forget, our bodies were designed to be good gold mining slaves. I mean, there's parts of us that are definitely intentionally made defective. So there's nothing wrong with having a hybrid. I see a lot of books where people are like, oh, it's the aliens are planning to take over the earth. I mean, for me, all I got to do is sit back for a second and think, why would they come all this different distance to take over the earth? If they wanted to kill us, they could just blow us up before they even got here. And
my problem is all the secretiveness. It's like I don't like anything they're doing.
That's more easily explained because the government, they respect the government, and the government said, "Don't you dare tell anybody. There's no landing on the White House lawn for you guys." So, what choice do they have? First, they contacted the Star Children. Then they contacted the reincarnated people. Then now they're contacting everybody, and they're saying, "Look, we're about to go through a huge opportunity, a graduation, and we're not selecting you, you're selecting yourself by your behavior. So this is a test. You can't just sit there and think, well, I'm a really great person and I'm kind. And that isn't the point. The point is, when there's a real life situation in front of you, are you able to act in accordance with that? So it isn't just your intentions, but it's also your behavior. And that's where the test is. So this is what we're coming up to. This apocalypse is a test where you lose everything, all your possessions. A lot of people are going to die, but even if you're going to die, if your last 5 minutes are spent helping somebody else, you've made the right choice. You see what I mean? And you're an eternal soul. So, of course, you keep being born in a body on a planet, you live, and then you die. And that happens even on these other dimensions. But in the next level up, with this hybrid humans, we're going to live 400 years. We're going to have IQs of 300. And I know that you think of Nancy Lieder as that woman, because she's so well known. That's all you have to say is she's that woman, But really, I have become friends with her, and she's a normal, nice person. She's 73 years old. She's never made a penny from any of this. She's got health problems. She's on Social Security, and she works on this day and night. And she takes questions from the public, and then she selects which ones have never been asked before, and then she asks the Zetas, and then she sits there at the typewriter, and they telepathically give her the answer. I wish I had such a strong contact, but I do have some kind of a contact, but it's not with the Zetas. It's like with Pleiadians or something, some other group. But Janet is definitely, she asked the Zetas, and the Zetas said, yes, Janet has been one of our contactees from the beginning. See, she's been working with us.
I have nothing personal against her at all. As a matter of fact, I've had listeners who have recently contacted me about having her on, and I'm all for it. I'll have her on, and I'll absolutely be respectful. I just, I would love proof. I just want proof.
Right. Well, so anyway, now I'm going to get into some of this stuff that's been happening lately. The first thing is Crimea and the Ukraine. Now, you have to understand that the Ukraine is like a passageway for pipelines, and the Russians are selling natural gas to Europe. So it's very important that the Ukraine and the natural gas continue, because 25% of the natural gas that's used in Europe, and much more than the United States, people use natural gas to heat themselves in the winter. They are really worried, because if you look at these future maps of the flooding, if the oceans come up 600, 700 feet, all of northern Europe's underwater. That's it, except for a few mountains in Switzerland, it's gone. And so where are all these people going to go? Because it's going to take about 2 years for all the ice to melt. So the water's going to come up every tide, 2 tides a day, 6 inches per tide, total 1 foot a day. So it's going to take about 2 years to come up 700 feet. Well, the Russians, they themselves know that Moscow is going to be underwater. So they've started moving all of their government offices to eastern Siberia. Now, at first you think, well, Siberia is flat, it's a swamp, that's not a good place. But actually, Siberia is a plateau. So if you think that's funny, just ask yourself, how come the United States government thinks Washington, D.C. is not good enough, and they're moving the FBI, the CIA, NASA, the IRS, everybody, slowly, of course, but they're moving them all to Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, Colorado is a very interesting place because, they are moving, just like you said. Also, they've legalized marijuana. You got to always wonder why they do anything that benefits us. There's always a reason behind it. And
exactly.
And they're looking to hire, last I checked, I was reading this article where they're actually hiring illegal immigrants now to teach in the schools there.
Yeah. It's just, but the reality is, and that's why, like, Obama knows this, Russia does not want the hordes of Europe to cross through the Ukraine and add to their refugees they're going to have in Eastern Europe. Russia actually doesn't have very many people. I mean, when you look at China and India, Russia's got the same problem that the United States and Scandinavia and Northern Europe has, and Japan has a really bad problem. Nobody's having kids. So, if you look at if nothing happened, probably the whole world would go Muslim, because they're having like 9 kids a family, and they have, they have this rule: kill the infidels, and have Sharia law. They don't believe in democracy, and women have to be tightly controlled and regulated and beaten down. They have to wear burqas. They got to have genital mutilation. It's like a rough situation. So, they're trying to say, well, we don't want all these immigrants crossing through Russia, and that's where we're going to stop them, is right there. So that's what's going on, and that's why the United States is not like making a big deal out of it. Also, what the hell could we do about it? It's borders Russia. I mean, Ukraine has, I don't know how long the border is, 1,000, 2,000 miles. So that, that's not going to change. Now, what Europe did, the reason why they invaded Libya was because they couldn't go east to Egypt because that's going to be underwater. They couldn't go west to Algeria and Morocco because they've got mountain tribes there. It's like Sicily or like Afghanistan. There's no way you can be, as an invader, come in and take over the place. No way. But Libya inland has unbelievable aquifer of sweet water and an unbelievable light sweet oil. So what they had to do was tenderize Libya. And so they came in and they roughed it up. And when pole shift is apparent, they're just going to land all the NATO armies, not the United States, but they're going to land all the European NATO armies in Libya and go inland and establish mountain redoubts for the monarchies and the rich, because where are they going to go? Like, originally the Queen was going to go to Western Australia. Well, that's tipping downwards. And Eastern Australia is tipping up. And then you have the United States just signed a huge contract to have a giant base in Eastern Australia. Why? Because when the ice melts and there's a new North Pole and a new South Pole, Antarctica is going to be open territory. The United States wants to land right on that melting land, Antarctica, and say, well, this is ours now. And why are the British building up a huge military force in the Falklands? Because there's going to be a new continent arising between South America and Africa, and they want to be the first to claim that. That's going to be part of the British Empire, because the British Isles are going to be underwater. So there's a lot of this stuff that seems to be like bad world events and strange things, but they actually are giant pieces to a puzzle that the governments know about this, but they're not telling you and me, the average person. So you look at Indonesia. They're still telling the people in Indonesia, well, it's rising water from global warming, and it's a lot of rain, and that's why part of Jakarta, Indonesia, are under 80 feet of salt water in the last 3 years. Just like the Zetas said would happen, it's happened. And now we get to what has captured the imagination of the whole world, which is Malaysian Flight 370.
Yes.
And I've heard everything: captured by aliens, terrorists, nutty pilot, terrorist pilot, Muslim pilot, evading radar, all this stuff. But look at the facts. The Boeing 777 Dreamliner is the safest aircraft ever designed. The only fatalities before this were where the pilot hit the seawall in San Francisco, and that was definitely pilot error. He came in too low, then he goes, oh crap, and he pulls the nose up, which drops the tail down, so it hits those Jersey barriers on top of the seawall because it's right on the harbor there, and the tail breaks off the plane, and two people fall out, and one of them gets run over by a fire truck. So there was really only one fatality from the crash. The second fatality was from getting run over by a fire truck, and the first one was because they fell out of the back of the plane. But what happened, and this is going to be hard to imagine, I think I've mentioned this before, but there used to be a magnetosphere simulator on the internet, and it showed the lines of magnetrons going from the North Pole to the South Pole of the Earth. And the solar wind blows them back away from the sun to the other side of the Earth, where they form like a teardrop shape. And that's the way it's always been. And all of a sudden, these magnetron pictures, these magnetosphere pictures, show like what looks like a bad hair day. The blue lines coming out of the North Pole are heading towards the sun, which doesn't make sense. And then the South Pole lines are heading towards, and it's just like, it's like if you had a really bad hair day and took a picture of your hair, that's what the magnetic lines on the Earth. So Then the government took it off. They stopped it. Oh, our lease ran out, and geez, wouldn't you know it, we can't find another supercomputer to do these calculations, so we're not going to have any more magnetosphere pictures anymore. But you know, when you see a bolt of lightning, most people think it comes from the sky, but if you really study it,
Yeah.
it's a discharge from the Earth going up.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the zetas say that there are precursor electrons and precursor magnetrons that science on Earth is not aware of. And what happens is that that when the lightning comes down, it's following the path of these precursor electrons and precursor magnetrons. So it isn't just randomly discharging, it's actually following this little path. So what's happening is, I don't know if you know this, but the continents of the Earth are made of granite, and granite is mostly quartz crystal. And when you squeeze quartz crystal, you get a flow of electrons. You've heard of piezoelectric lighters, and you pull the trigger, and there's a little spark at the end there between the two wires. That's piezoelectric effect. So because the continents are shifting around and squeezing each other, actually sinking the little southeastern corner of Southeast Asia, there's pressure there that's generating an electron flow, and the South China Sea is a very shallow body of water. So you have this huge flow of electrons through the salt water, and the tail of Planet X is pointed right at the Earth, raining us with rocks right now, and red rains all over the world. And it's creating these magnetic hotspots. Well, this airplane, I mean, all these airplanes, you know, they're not using vacuum tubes. They're using these little integrated circuits where a chip the size of a postage stamp has, you know, 1 billion transistors on it. And they're each made out of a layer that's 1 molecule thick. And it doesn't take much of a spark to blow that. Now, this is actually the second time this happened. The first time was Flight 447, which left Brazil headed for Paris. And about 10 minutes into the flight, the pilot said, he was talking to the control tower, and he goes, all the systems are failing. And then he nosed down and hit the ocean and broke apart. It took 2 years to recover the black box, but they knew where he crashed. And that was the same thing. And why is that? Because, as I've said before, the Pacific is going to narrow, the Atlantic's going to widen during pole shift. And in this process, as the Zetas have pointed out, the northern tip of South America is going to move several hundred miles west. In order to do that, it has to swivel on the tip, which is attached to the Antarctic plate. Well, the tip is very firmly attached to the Antarctic plate, and it's not going to swivel. So what's going to happen is there's going to be a huge crack on the Atlantic coast of Brazil that's going to open up in order for the big lump of northern South America to move to the left, to the west. And that crack is the squeezing of the crystals, and that's where that Airbus took off, and that's what happened to it. And what did they do? Did they say, well, this is caused by magnetic hotspots and electron flows? No, they said pilot error. So then now you have Malaysian 370, and I've been watching all the coverage. It was really funny. I don't know if you saw it, but I didn't see it, but I saw the replay of it. Saturday Night Live made jokes of CNN last Saturday night, and CNN has had all this breaking news, but then they don't know where the plane is. They don't know when it will be found. So Saturday Night Live did a spoof where this woman takes a pregnancy test to find out if she's pregnant. So she gets this little white thing that she's supposed to pee on, and it says right on it, CNN pregnancy test. And it says, we're working hard to let you know whether you're pregnant or not. And this goes on for, 10 minutes. And the whole time, she's peed on this thing, and the little device keeps saying, we're working hard to tell you whether you're pregnant or not. And that was their way of making fun of all the CNN coverage where, and that saved the station. I mean, they were planning to show viral videos because nobody was watching CNN, but by having all this breaking news. Well, the interesting thing is that 4 days later, Malaysian Flight 066, I don't know if you've heard of that. Did you?
666. No, I haven't heard about that one.
066.
Oh, no.
It took off. See, that happened on like a Thursday. On the following Monday, just like 4 days later, Malaysian flight 066, and I don't know what plane that was, but it took off from Kuala Lumpur to go to where's it? Oh, Seoul, Korea. That was its destination, and it gets over the exact spot where the crystals are being squeezed with the sinking of the southeast plate. There's the electron flow. There was another magnetic hot spot in the atmosphere caused by these magnetron flows from the bad hair day of Earth and Planet X, and all of a sudden the whole cabin blacked out. Now, this is Monday. It took off from Kuala Lumpur. It's over the South China Sea, exactly where 370 disappeared, and all the lights on the plane went out. They had still enough electricity for the pilot to say, everybody put on your life jackets because we might have to make a landing on the water. And amazingly enough, two of the other engine failed. I don't know how many engines it had, but one of them stayed running, and that was enough for them to make it to Hong Kong, where they landed safely. And all the systems in the cockpit, almost all of them, had shorted out exactly as 370. So the point is that from now on, everybody should be aware that these very sophisticated, very safe airplanes can be shorted out by electron flows in shallow water. And Nancy asked the Zetas, where are these places? And she said the whole Asian coast of the Pacific, from Indonesia and Malaysia all the way up to Vladivostok, Siberia. Wherever there's shallow water, there's an electron flow. And if there just happens to be a magnetic hotspot over your plane, it can short out because of these precursor electrons and magnetrons, creating basically a discharge that goes right through the circuitry. And another place is the western side of Lake Michigan, the western side of Lake Superior, both sides of Central America, the Caribbean, and other places. I forget what all of them are, but it's wherever there's shallow water. I think the Eastern Mediterranean, and so that's enough to make somebody not exactly want to take an airplane, maybe drive or take a ship or a train,
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot going on. You were talking about pole shift, and it's hard to say exactly what they're planning for, but for some of us anyways, but they're planning something. They've got all these underground bunkers. They've got it just goes on.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is and the one that really gets me the most that I will never forget is that when Vice President Cheney got the Wyoming legislature to come within just a couple of votes of buying a used aircraft carrier for Wyoming. And, if you know geography, and after I've watched some of these interviews on TV where they just take people on the street and ask them normal questions and they don't have a clue, I don't even know if people know that Wyoming's not on the ocean. But the idea that they would have an aircraft carrier, well, the prophecy is that the St. Lawrence Seaway will rip wide open right across the country over to Nebraska. And Edgar Cayce himself said Omaha, Nebraska is the future greatest seaport in North America. And the Mississippi and Ohio valleys are going to sink, and the salt water is going to come in the St. Lawrence. The Great Lakes will all be salt water, and there'll be a 200-mile wide pathway down to the Gulf of Mexico. And with the increase in the sea level, the eastern United States, the Adirondacks and the Appalachians, are going to be the same as New Zealand is to Australia.
All right, and Gordon, let me ask you this real quick, because we have someone in the chat who I don't know talks like they know you.
Go to a commercial, right?
Yeah, we're about to go to a commercial, but you and Nancy, you both are friends, because
yes,
this guy keeps saying that she doesn't acknowledge you, and I don't think that's true.
Nancy didn't acknowledge me for a year because she got mad at me at something I said that bothered her, and nobody's perfect. And I'll give you an example. I was on a job, and I said to the guy, he was paying me $25 an hour to tile this house, and I said, look, I got this high school student that could screen the sand, because I do tile like the old way, cement floors and walls, floor drains, cement ceilings, and then I tile everything, So I said, you're paying me 25 an hour to screen sand and mix mortar, but I could get this kid in here. He's worked with me before. He's really good, and I pay him $7.50 an hour. And he goes, I can't pay a high school kid $7.50 an hour. And I said, why in the hell not? You're paying me 25 an hour, and I have to spend half my time mixing sand. And he goes, no. He goes, most of the contractors on this job are getting paid $7 an hour, and they're married and they have families, and I can't get a high school kid in here and pay him $7.50 an hour. So no, I'm not going to hire him. So then pretty soon he goes, this project's way over budget, so I'm firing you. So, and there was 40 other subcontractors. It was a big multi-million-dollar mansion, and he's hired all these other subcontractors, and so they're all, well, you got fired, aren't you leaving? And I just kept working and tiling, and they're going, didn't you hear the guy? He fired you. And I said, look, this is never going to get finished if I don't do it. And I said, he thinks he's going to get somebody to replace me, but he's not. And just watch what happens. So he got all these people to come over, and they're going, well, first of all, Gordon's doing as good or better job than I could ever do if I tried. Second of all, if I take this Gordon, what's going to stop Gordon from taking my next job from me? They go, I'm not doing this. Gordon's doing a great job. Just keep paying him. And one after the other, all these people that could do tile work came, and they all said the same thing. And so after 2 weeks, and I worked for 2 weeks without any pay at all, I worked and I kept doing it. He comes back and he goes, you're rehired with all the back pay. So that's the kind of person that I am. You see what I mean? So when Nancy got mad at me and didn't want to talk to me, I didn't get upset. I didn't badmouth her or something. I was thinking, well, I just hope she comes around, because look, nobody's perfect. I mean, if I knew more about you, probably you're not perfect, and I can volunteer that I'm not perfect.
I'm far from perfect. I can attest.
Right. Right. So, I know how important it is that we put together. And so I just waited, and finally she sent me a Christmas card. Then I sent her a Christmas card. Then I called her up, and I said, I miss you. And she goes, I know, because we have another friend that was telling her, Gordon really misses you. And so anyway, we've been friends again since Christmas. So,
well, good. And that's it. People do. I've had spats with people since I've done this radio show. I have guests who got mad, and I told them where to go, and then later it's and I had several bosses like that. I had one who. He was having a bad day. He fired me that day because I spoke up to him. And about an hour later, he called me and he says, let's just be men. We all have our days, and hired me back. And I actually got a promotion and was supervisor, and my pay went up. And
right.
Yeah. So, everything happens for a reason.
I can't, if I was really harsh on everybody, I can imagine how harsh people could be with me. But, I was a member of the Ning, but there were 5,000 members of the Ning, and they decided they were just going to cut back. So they unfriended, I guess, or deleted their membership of 4,500 of those people. And people were calling me up, Gordon, I got kicked off the Ning. I can't ask any more questions. And I'm like, well, I was too, so I don't know what's going on, but if they're happy, I'm happy, And the thing is Nancy puts her email address right on zetatalk.com. It's got email Nancy, and how difficult is it? Nancy@zetatalk.com. So, and just to show that I am back in her good graces, she put on the Ning last week that I had asked a question, a really good question, and she was going to comment on it. So, great. Yes, I was, I guess you could say, banished or banned or in her bad graces or not worthy of contact for about a year, but she got over that. And it never really bothered me because I did think that she and I should be working together and that, and look, she's a normal person. That's the thing. If you're trying to think, well, she's going to be really special, she's going to be really perfect, she's doing the best she can, and it's not easy for her either. I mean, can you imagine the difficulty she goes with people because they're like, well, you're a hoax, you lie, you this and that and whatever. And she can only tell people what the Zetas tell her. So,
I can honestly say that if a UFO came and zapped me up and I sat and I had a conversation with them and I came back to tell people about it, I would expect to be ridiculed and laughed at, and oh, he's a
Yeah.
hoaxer, and I know. So
Well, look, Janet and I went out to dinner at this seafood restaurant called the Weather Vane. They have a chain all over New England. We're sitting there, and there were some people from the hospital in our town. We're having a Christmas dinner in the other room, and they were pointing at us and snickering at us. And these are the doctors and the nurses from the goddamn local hospital. I mean, we put up with stuff that I'm sure other people would have just given up. But I said to Janet, their world is about as big as a postage stamp, and our world is as wide as the universe. So really, they don't know as much as we know, and we know it from first-hand experience. So the kind of stuff that I'm telling you guys tonight, that's from personal experience. And I may not have been in contact with Zetas, but I'm living with somebody who is, and I'm in contact with a different group,
all right,
and there's lots of groups.
Hang on for a moment, Gordon. Let's get this break.
You're still alive.
Yeah.
Well, my eyesight's gone to hell to the point I get like between 250 and 500 emails a day. And I haven't read a day past February 18th yet. So some guy was telling me, didn't you get my email on February 27th? I thank you for telling me the day you sent it because I want to find it. But I said, I can't, I got to put on magnifying glasses. I got to get a Sherlock Holmes. But my distance vision and everything is okay as long as I'm not trying to read this impossibly small typefaces on the computer screen. I mean, I don't know about you. If my wife's on Facebook, I'm not, but I go to Facebook, and I mean, I don't know what they did. They went to 4-point type or something to fit it all in. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And and here's another thing for anybody, because every now and then I get these little challenges. People like to hide behind their profiles and talk shit. And the bottom line is, if you've got something to say, by all means, you're more than welcome to call in 803-317-2264.
Man up.
Yeah, exactly. It's they talk crap behind their profiles. But they don't have the balls to call in and confront you. And so,
right.
So I'll just leave it there. I figure.
Now, I've been asked a lot of times to comment on conspiracies, and that is a little hobby that I have, but I don't usually do it because, Planet X is a big enough conspiracy. That just about covers everything right there, because that explains so much, like you're saying about the bunkers and the gated communities and the fact you can't buy any ammunition and it's really hard to get bullets anymore. And it's funny how they started making lots of assault rifles, so you can still buy those, and you can still buy lots of assault rifle ammunition, but just try and get a 22 caliber long rifle and you can forget it. But the Bundy Ranch interested me a little bit because the real thing behind that is they want to build this huge solar farm to power Las Vegas. And they've got this endangered desert tortoise. So they selected the Bundy Ranch as the mitigation site. So they want to get rid of the cattle so they can fence it off and go, yes, look, it's all natural. And the desert tortoise is doing so fine. And that would allow this huge solar ranch to go in next to Las Vegas. So, the poor guy's been grazing cattle on that land, his family, for 140 years. I mean, the drought is so bad out there. He's got 158,000 acres, and he's got like 1,000 cattle. That means each steer, and I love it when they say they're cows, because they're definitely not all cows, but I don't even know if there's any cows, but they need each one needs 158 acres just to survive. Well, in Maine, I mean, last June, I thought I was living in a rainforest. I can just wait to see what June this year is like. But we had 30 days in June, like everybody else, but it rained 29 days out of the 30. I mean, this is not normal, and it's all caused by earth wobble. But, that poor guy Bundy, and it's already been to federal court. It's already been to a federal appellate court, and he's lost 4 times, and then he stopped paying. But, it really is interesting, because this is coming down to, the people versus the government. And you've got luckily the governor and a couple of the, federal Congress people, senators and congressmen have spoken out and said, lay off this guy, I mean, go mitigate your solar farm somewhere else, or it's just ridiculous.
It is. So now we got about, I don't know, another 20 some minutes left here. And certainly after the show, I'll be going out to see if I can get a glimpse of the moon.
Oh, yeah. Don't miss that now. Right after the show, about an hour and a half after the show, is when it should be happening or be starting to happen.
Yeah. So with the time we got left, maybe you could give us.
I would like to talk about, originally the Zetas said, because the number one question everybody says is, so when is pole shift? When is it? Well, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, all my bees froze to death this year. They froze to death last year. I don't even know if I have the money to buy some more bees next month, and I don't even know if there'll be any bees available to buy. But with a blueberry farm, I get 100% pollination if I have bees, and if I don't, it's very spotty or non-existent. So, I just, that's the number one question. When is pole shift? And I assure you that Nancy Leader is not the greatest at keeping secrets. And if she's told me that if she knew when pole shift was, it would slip out one way or another. So, so what the Zetas have done is given an event calendar. And they had these stages, like there are 10 stages. The 10th stage is pole shift. And we were in 2011, we were in 7 out of 10. And that meant that we were supposed to have the New Madrid fault sink, and 40 million people lose their homes, and who knows how many dead people, and then there was going to be a tsunami in the middle of the Atlantic that, because of the Gulf Stream, was not going to hit the United States, but instead the whole force of it, 300 feet, was going to sweep right over the British Isles. Then it was going to flood the lowlands of Europe, and then all of a sudden. Because Nancy had always said there's no extraterrestrial devices on Earth. There are devices that the ETs helped us design and build. So we do have what I would call extraterrestrial technology, but it's not anything that they just landed and handed the government. It's stuff the government doesn't have the greatest stuff, because the ETs have been really close with the real stuff. So I'm sure we have anti-gravity ships and, all kinds of stuff like that. But the point is that in 2011 it came out that the extraterrestrials had put these little vibrating boxes on all the fault lines of the Earth to hold off the Earth changes so that we could go to 8. Now, 8 out of 10 is very interesting, and that's massive social change. So now we've been in with 7 out of 10 on hold, and we've been in 8 out of 10 for like almost 3 years now. And yet, if you look around, I mean, if I ask the average person, and I'm talking about people that are interested, not just the average person, but average person that's interested in this subject. And I say, what signs do you see of massive social change? Well, first, there was the Occupy Wall Street movement, and that seems to have died out. I don't know. I wasn't impressed with it to begin with, and I'm not impressed with it now. But, that was like maybe possibly some sort of massive social change. Then you had so-called Arab Spring, which I wasn't even clear on what that was, because it seemed to ultimately have caused chaos in Egypt and Libya. So I don't know, and then you've got, like the best thing recently that just happened the other day was the Taliban said, if you go vote for, in the elections, we're going to kill you. And out of 7 million people voted, only 20 people were killed by the Taliban, and 1/3 of the voters were women. And it's like the women are saying, we're fed up with it. We don't want to be have genital mutilation and be told we can't get an education and we can't drive and we have to wear burqas, and so that's like an encouraging thing. But all in all, I don't really know that like, if you had to say that there was massive social change, what would you point to?
Social change? What would I point to?
Massive social change. Do you see any sign of it around the world? And if you do, what would you say that you?
Yeah, I do. I actually, I see people, maybe not enough yet, but I see people coming together, and it's like they're taking the blinders off and finally seeing what we've been talking about for a long time.
That's definitely the process. I guess that I get discouraged, and it isn't that I want 90% of the world's population to die yesterday or tomorrow, but I'm like, in order to have all these beautiful things that are supposed to be coming our way, we have to clear away the dirt, and it's going to take a big broom, and where is it, So, I mean, so many people I talk to, well, shouldn't there be like some massive earthquake, the likes of which nobody's ever seen, or a volcano going off? And, but you see the government still saying that there's a global warming, that, which is a total lie. And, I mean, there's a volcano that's been swelling in Iceland.
Uh-oh. Did we lose you?
What?
Oh, okay. I thought we lost you for a minute there.
No.
You said a
so
volcano
in
Iceland.
And if it was off, it would cool the northern latitudes for years. And the CO2 from that one volcano would equal all the fossil fuel we've burned in the last 1,000 years.
Yeah, absolutely. But,
just the hypocrisy. Like I saw that in Scandinavia, the glacier melted, and it exposed this Eskimo village, and all these climate warming scientists were like, see how warm it is because of the CO2. It's melted the ice, and now we see this Eskimo village that was buried under the ice. And I'm like, what are you kidding? What idiots? How much CO2 was there 10,000 years ago when the Eskimos built the village? The ice obviously wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly.
And how much? Like I was at the beach and I was smoking a cigarette, and this woman sat next to me on a blanket, and she just lit into me about smoking a cigarette, and she went on and on, and I just kept looking at her right in the eye.
Yeah, you're cutting out on us, I think, Gordon.
Yeah, I got yellow bars.
Okay, well we've got a little bit of time left, so hopefully you'll last. Global warming, where do you sit on that whole thing? Oh, go ahead.
It's a global warming's alliance to cover up the fact that Planet X is here, and it's laying on its side. So its North Pole is pointed at the equator, and it's 23 times the magnetic field of Earth. So it's causing magma to circulate more than it would have.
Right. Oh, yeah, we're starting to lose them. I kind of think that global warming is really a cover up for the geoengineering, for one. But as the Planet X, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know what happened, folks. I think.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay, so I don't believe in any geoengineering. They'd like to do a lot of this stuff. I mean, HARP, they'd love to do that, but you'd have to have all of Alaska be covered with nuclear reactors to do what all the people think it's doing.
Then what are the chemtrails all about? Uh-oh. Yeah, he's losing his connection. Oh, there you are.
So it's to cover up Planet X.
Okay, now I got a guy who helps out in the chat, and he loves to hear that because he said that the chemtrails were to hide Planet X. Well, here's my argument with that. Maybe you can direct me. But why would they need chemtrails to cover up a planet that you need infrared to see in the first place?
Infrared. Like I've been taking pictures of two suns using double red filters, red number 25 filters. There's no photo stores left, but you used to be able to go into a photo store and buy a red filter for like $3. And then you can buy a welding filter. I have number 12 welding filter, but now I can take pictures of the glowing area at the 5 o'clock position next to the sun without any filter on the camera. There's a guy named Alberto who's been taking pictures from Italy for like 10, 14 years, and he had to use filters, and recently he announced that he's getting all these pictures of this glowing area to the 5 o'clock position of the sun off to the side without any filters at all. So I'm telling people, just take your digital camera, point it at the sun, and shoot a picture. Do not look through the single lens reflex because you'll burn out your retina. Do not do that. But just point it at the sun and take a picture, and then look at the picture and tell me that's normal.
Do you notice that the sun, it's like bright white? Have you noticed that? I mean, it's not like...
Yes.
Yeah.
The color, they call that color temperature. So light has different temperatures. There's a spectrum, and different temperatures, like it goes up towards ultraviolet or down towards infrared, and the whole range in between. But it seems like sunlight has got this white light now, and you know, you notice it with going out for a suntan, because by the time you used to feel hot, that's when you were starting. That's when you already had your tan and you could go in. But now, before you feel hot, you're already burned to a crisp. And the light has changed. You're very right, Michael.
Yeah, it's definitely changed. And, you know, I've used the welder's mask. I don't know which one it was when back in 2010, a job I had, they had one laying around. And I took it out and looked at the sun, and I couldn't see anything. But, you know, so for me, I haven't seen it yet. I've only read about it. I know that it's out there. I know that NASA took it serious enough to go out and search for it. And they announced that they found it, and then it went.
1983.
Yeah,
that's what they did. December 1983. They go, we found Planet X, and that night they changed their minds, and the next day they go, oops, we're still looking for it. No, we didn't find it, and I'm sure it was because the next logical question is, what does that mean?
Oh,
and
yeah. And here's something I wanted to ask you while we got time is, what's your take on these planets and so on that have been discovered past?
That's good that you asked that, because this is like a way of creating a background where NASA can suddenly explain, well, you know, we didn't know there could be a rogue planet that could be in an orbit between the sun and its dark twin that nobody can see, and that it comes back every 3,657 years on the average. But now that we know there's all these loose planets roaming around there, so this is all a warm-up, so they don't seem like total idiots. You know, this is a warm-up to the announcement. And that's like, did you take a look at that Cosmos show with Neil deGrasse Tyson?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's awful. I mean, I didn't even like Carl Sagan, because I knew he knew about ETs, and I felt he was just lying like a rug. And then when he suddenly died of cancer, I felt that it was because he decided to tell the truth, and they put plutonium in his toothpaste or something.
Yeah, probably.
But I really didn't like him, because to me he sounded like he had a paperclip on his nose, and if he leaned over backwards too far, he'd fall over. But anyway, they started this new Cosmos show, and see, Neil deGrasse Tyson is going to be the spokesman. So when and if they ever announce it and people find out, and if there's still satellite communications and television, then they're going to go to Neil deGrasse Tyson to explain it. So he already knows about pole shift, but so they really hyped the show, and I watched the first episode, and it was so badly made. I'm like, why bother? This was really a disappointment. And Neil deGrasse Tyson looked totally stressed. I'm sure the government's telling him in one ear, don't give away Planet X, but dance around the subject, talk about rogue planets and Kepler bodies and asteroids from deep space, and don't tell anybody that there's rocks coming through the atmosphere, because the tail of Planet X is full of rocks and it's rippling right towards Earth right now. Don't tell them that.
Yeah.
So these are all little pieces of the puzzle, but they paint the picture that it wouldn't be happening unless the big thing, Planet X causing pole shift, was about to happen. So, but when, I don't know. And if, like Nancy said, if she knew, she would have probably already slipped out. And if I knew, I'd tell you, because I don't know. So the ETs said, if it's announced to the whole world at once in a giant television announcement live all around the world, then they will say when pole shift is, so that everyone, the little people and the big people, the mighty and the common man, all of them, when they all find out at the same exact moment, then they'd be glad to tell everybody. But they're not going to tell anybody before then, because the elite and the powerful would take advantage of the situation. And I believe that.
Oh yeah, I mean we're watching Agenda 21 unfold before our faces here. Land grabs,
Oh,
everything.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's happening. I mean they're conditioning everybody. So there's no doubt something's coming down the pike here, and it's not going to be good. And people want to keep living in their imaginary world and think, oh well, no, that's not going to happen here. It can't happen to me because I'm me and I live in America. Well, I have news for you. It
Right.
is
Well, I've
happening.
got a pension fund.
Yeah. Yep. I got this and I got that. The fact is the financial system's gonna crash. It has to. There's
Well, look
just
at it.
yeah,
What a mess.
it is.
It's
It
a house of cards.
it is, and they're starting to fall. And when that happens, all hell's gonna break loose, I think.
Well, I have a friend who is friends with a famous economist, and he was at an airport, and he saw a whole bunch of troops coming back from Afghanistan, and he thought he'd be a wise ass, and he went over to them and he said, the real unemployment rate, they say it's 7%, but it's more like 15%. It might even be 30%. It might even be 50%. So where do you guys think you're going to be finding jobs now that you're released? And the soldiers all looked at him and like he was crazy and said, what makes you think that? He goes, we're not being released. He goes, and that was a whole bunch of soldiers, and this one guy was speaking back to the economist. He goes, we're on our way out west to train for the riots.
Yeah. Well, I'm getting word that federal agents are back at that ranch. Now, I don't know. I'm going to try to check it out when we get done with the show here tonight. But if
Right.
that's,
Well, I don't think they're going to give up because they have 4 different court decisions that are in their favor. But I think if the governor and the other people say, come on, forget mitigating the tortoise for your solar project.
yeah, well, what we need is the sheriff needs to step up and he, because he's supposed to be the ultimate authority. So he should
Right.
step up and tell them to get lost. He's not going to do that, though, because he's on their payroll.
Right. And, that's true of all these major corporations. They buy what they want. And, and they control the media. They control, the government agencies. And so, but the whole thing is a trend. And the trend is to cover up the truth for as long as possible so that the wealthy and the elite have the maximum advantage.
Yep, that's their plan. Well, I see them getting buried in their little bunkers, their underground bunkers.
Exactly. Because listen, you think about what it would be like to live through the apocalypse. Well, the country of Chile is sort of living through that now. They're having gigantic quakes offshore. It's a miracle that they haven't had a tsunami hit the shore yet. But now Valparaiso is in flames. I mean, they've got a forest fire that's burned 5,000 homes already. They can't control it. It might burn the whole city. And I'm sure that people are thinking, well, who cares about the apocalypse in a year or 5 years or whatever? I could lose my life tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. That's one. We're not promised tomorrow, so make your imprint today. And
Right.
I have kids. I've got grandchildren. I want them to have some kind of future here, and that's why I do what I do. And I just hope people start coming together because it's the only way. When they see you in numbers, it's a whole nother ball game than when they're coming and kicking in doors and there's only 3 or 4 people and nobody does anything. So
Right. Well, that was the great thing that everybody showed up to let the government know that it just isn't right. I mean, there's nothing good about it. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, and what they plan on probably and what they hope for is, well, people got jobs to get back to. They're going to, in this economy, they better appreciate their jobs and they'll get back to work. And, well, our job is to sit here and harass this farmer or rancher. So, they underestimate the people, I think. What I seen this past weekend made me feel real good, and I hope that it keeps up, and I hope people will come together unselfishly for each other. And
the beauty of it so far, at least, is no shooting. It's just the numbers of people, and they're realizing, well, if we start shooting, the other side has guns too. So that's something, that's pretty positive.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it
you know,
is. Well, Gordon, we're getting down at the end here, and I want to give you a chance to speak whatever you like, anything you want to plug or what have you.
no,
Go right ahead.
I have nothing to, I have nothing to plug. I'm going to just plug your show and say thank you for giving me the opportunity to bring this stuff up because it's so important. And the media is never gonna. You haven't seen me be interviewed on CBS yet, have you?
No, no, no. But I see a lot of other guys interviewed there. So,
Well, but they're a bunch of clowns, in my opinion.
well, yeah.
There's so few people that really understand the whole panorama of what's going on, and I know from years of talking about this stuff that I'm really good at explaining it, and I hope I put it in plain enough English that I've gotten people interested to go check this stuff out yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a planet in the sky next to the sun, so it isn't exactly hidden. And if you go just through the digital camera, I mean, how expensive is that to keep shooting digital pictures of the sun and just looking at them and seeing what's going on? But that's what the chemtrails are for. I mean, I have friends in Phoenix, and they say they're so heavily covered over with grayness in the sky. And I don't know, I feel lucky in Maine. Like, we've had a lot of beautiful blue sky days. I never see chemtrails here. I saw them about 10 years ago, but it seems like they gave up on it.
Well, lucky you. That's all I could say. We get sprayed here like roaches in Colombia. I mean, constantly.
Well, see, the original concept was load the planes up with all these bio warfare chemicals and viruses, and then just before pole shift, spray everybody, and that way we'll never get caught and we'll never be accused of any crimes. But then it didn't happen when they thought it was, and they were sure it was going to happen in 2003. And one of the reasons why is because Nancy thought it was going to happen in 2003. And the Zetas said, well, we're sorry that we did that, but that accomplished a much greater purpose, and we call that a white lie. Well, okay, fine. I'm not an extraterrestrial. I don't know how they decide stuff, but they're trying to trap these selfish people in their own little games. And so a lot of this stuff has been going on, but it's failing little by little. I mean, look at Edward Snowden. People say he's a traitor. I say he should be given the Nobel Prize and a couple $1 million.
See, and I look at him. I don't think he's done any harm. I think he's actually helped in the way that the mainstream media watchers now hear what we've been saying for years, and they're like, oh, maybe they're not so crazy. But at the same time, I mean, he is saying what we've been saying right along. Well, a lot of us have been saying that.
Exactly, but he's got the proof because he was on the inside.
True. I can't argue with that.
So I mean, I understand how they feel. Well, he stole all these documents and now he's sharing them with the world. Well, too bad. Maybe he shouldn't have been doing that in the first place. It's really funny that. That new NSA computer, where's that, in Utah or something? The big building.
I think so.
They're using so much water, it's obscene. If people just knew how much water was going into that building to cool those computers, to save all this data and all this stuff, for spying on people. I mean, there's nobody that isn't being spied on, really. Everything that you say is being recorded. Every email you ever wrote, or every text, or every cell phone conversation, every regular conversation. They're photographing both sides of every letter that go through the post office. The next step is probably just to open them up and read them and scan those too. I mean, and your Constitution ends at the border. So when you're going to send something internationally, they've always opened all those letters up. And when you cross the border with your computer, they can just seize it and study it for weeks or whatever. But I think as long as everybody knows that that's what's happening, and I know there's been times when agents have come to hear me speak and stuff like that, and I've addressed them directly, and I said, look, you better be listening to me because I'm telling you stuff your bosses are never going to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're never going to hear any of this on. What I noticed though sometimes is the mainstream media will try to ignore something until you see different news outlets on the internet making big news of it, and then they're forced to cover it. And that's what we need to do. We need to start forcing them to cover stuff. And the more of us that turn out at things like the Bundy Ranch, well, the more this stuff will be covered and noticed by many more people. It's just, prepare, folks, because something's coming. That's all I could say.
Yeah, and don't keep quiet. Express the feelings of your heart, and I'm sure that the average person wants to live a nice life, have good family, have food and shelter, and just be able to really have all their necessities taken care of, and they're not afraid to work for it to do that. But they, and then they could have the time to really examine the important stuff. But you've got so many kids sitting on their asses on couches playing video games. And, people don't know anything. I mean, they've really succeeded in dumbing down the educational system to where it's a joke. And, that's what they wanted, is they wanted a bunch of sheeple. Well, they've got them, But the thing is if you're starting to wake up, don't sit on your ass. Go out and meet some other people and talk about this stuff. Bring it out,
Absolutely. Well, Gordon, we're just about out of time here. I do want to thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you again in the near future. Just keep being you, my friend.
Yeah, well, I'm just doing what I can to get all this stuff out, and I really do appreciate it. I love you as a host and being on your program. So I thank you very much, Michael, and God bless you and all your listeners. And just remember, if you don't say a word and you don't, when you learn new stuff, it should change you, and it should change what you want to do with your life. And, that's what's really important is, I've been saying to people for years that, all these people that are ill with diseases and all this stuff. And I'm like, look, there's no way you can be healthy if you aren't happy. And to be happy, you have to be happy with who you are and what you do. Well, start there. Are you really happy with your life? So many people I talk to say, well, I know something really big is happening. I could just feel it, but I don't know what it is.
All right. Well, we're about out. We've got seconds left here, but thanks, Gordon, very much.
At the moon. Go out and look at the moon.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for your time, and I hope you get to see it tonight. I'm certainly going to try over here.
Okay. Well, good night, Michael.
All right.
Thank you.
Good night, Gordon. All right, everybody. That was Gordon James Gianninoto. The body doesn't want to do what it used to.
And I'm 65,
Yeah.
So listen, I was listening to your the first part of the show before I came on, so I'd be ready for what you were talking about. And I do have some definite comments. And then I've got some really interesting information. I know you're not going to believe in extraterrestrials till one lands in your yard, but they've landed in my yard. So you're getting it firsthand, right from the source. So don't forget that when you're contemplating what's going on.
All right, great. Well, I'm all ears. I want to hear what's been happening.
The first thing that's interesting is that the God of the Bible was really selfish Anunnaki from Planet X, who created Adam and Eve, and then there was a lot of relatives. There were the king's two sons, Enlil and Enki, and Enlil was the bad one, and Enki was the good one. Enlil was put in charge of Earth, and he started making man for slaves to mine gold. And it's Enki that came along and said, oh, "What are you guys doing? My brother has you as a slave." And his symbol, each brother had his own symbol. The symbol of the good brother was the serpent. So it's the serpent that told the Adam and Eve that they were slaves. So, but anyway, moving right along to that, as other members of the family came down and there were more and more people, they decided to each member of the family, as selfish as they were, should have their own city. So, like, you had the Sumerians, you had the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians. They each had their own god, which was a different Anunnaki. And of course, they were a little weird, marrying their sisters and creating weapons so they could go to war with the other cities. And there was some good stuff. They taught them how to make tools, but then they said, well, let's make a lot of weapons. And then they taught. But anyway, one thing that's really clear about these people is that different branches, when they took over, like let's say one branch invaded the other branch, they'd say, okay, you were all worshiping on a sun calendar. Now you're going to worship on a moon calendar. So now all the religious holidays would be lunar holidays. And if people aren't familiar with this, there's 13 full moons in one calendar year. Now, so the big issue is these blood moons, the 4 blood moons. And that does happen every so often, like every 500 years, you get a blood moon, which is where the moon goes into the shadow of the earth. The penumbra and the umbra are centered right on the moon. So in the center, you get this dark brown, and in the edges, you get this blood red. And so that's happening tonight. Now, you got a little confused, but I hate to tell you this, Michael. At midnight, it becomes the 15th. And right after midnight, at 1:46 in the morning Eastern time is when it starts.
That's what was confusing me, because I'm reading one story that says it's tomorrow. And, yeah, I never put that together. It's my nights and days mixed together.
And if you hear whistling of the wind in the background, I'm
going to bring Gordon on now and get this party started. All right. Well, it's ringing, folks. So it might take a minute. All right. Well, let's try back in just a second here. He's obviously not ready yet. So, yeah, I've got a new setup now, and I have 3 monitors in my face. I've got one has a switchboard on it. One has chat room, news, and also I could pull things up now if I have to during the show, which is good. And then, of course, I've got the other screen has got the phone lines on it, so I could see everything. So, but I'm getting used to it nevertheless, because it took me a while for 2. Now I got 3 screens. Okay, so here he is, and we're going to bring him on now. He just told me he's ready. Gordon, welcome aboard.
Oh, good evening, dear sir. It's a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you back. How you been?
Oh, I've been really good, except for my eyesight suffering a little bit. I guess that's going to happen when you get older. That was the one part I didn't think would be defective.
Yeah, it's crazy, because as you get older, me too now. I remember my father used to get little labels with small print and say, Mike, what's that say? I can't read it. And I used to love reading it for him, because I thought, great, I got 20/20. Now, I have to have big font.
Yeah, well, it's the last couple of weeks, it's gotten to the point where you have one bad eye, and then I got one good eye, and the bad eye got worse, then it got better. So it's starting to get better, but it's basically like putting a sheet of crumpled cellophane over your left eye and walking around. And then my right eye, and that's been going on for 1.5 years. So now I've worn out my right eye. So my right eye is like so tired it doesn't really want to focus on much. So I'm going to have to get like a 60-inch screen and hook it up to my computer. And when I write something, it's going to have to be with Microsoft Word with like 36-point text. It's like, it's a joke.
Yeah. Well, the doctor will tell you eat more carrots. I don't think that's going to do it.
No, I don't know what's going to do. The doctor said, send an email to your family and see if anybody else has the problem. And I found 18 other members of my immediate family. Well, I'm Sicilian, so you can imagine there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And the 18 members wrote back and had left eye problems, but none had the problem I have. So that was like, okay.
Well, but I'll tell you, aging is an interesting process. I mean, I'm only 42 right now, but I could feel differences.
I easily have a 75 or 80 mile an hour wind up here, and a pretty heavy overcast, but I can just see this white spot. So after this broadcast is over at midnight Eastern, I'm going to pay attention to what's going on outside and see if there's any hope I can see it. But as you know, I studied astronomy and space science. I got a grant from the National Science Foundation when I was 15, so I'm pretty well versed in these subjects. And there's a couple of guys go, oh, this is beyond coincidence that that these blood moons are occurring on the Jewish Passover and the other Jewish holiday, and they're like beyond coincidence. Well, guess what? The last selfish Anunnaki king, who was known as Jehovah, he had a lunar calendar. So the Jews put all their events on the lunar calendar. And of course, a full moon is a full moon. So of course, there's a coincidence between Jewish religious holidays and these blood moons. But I'll tell you what, the moons came first, and the pasting a lunar holiday on top of that is what happened. So this is not something that's I heard on YouTube somebody go, he wrote a book, Four Blood Moons or something, and it was quite a bestseller. And
I seen that too. Somebody had sent it to me, and you know, for me, a lot of this stuff I think is easily explained, but some people just don't want to hear it.
Right. Well, see, what's odd is that there's such an exact passage through the center of the shadow. That's what's a little bit odd. That's what happens every 500 years. But you got this one tonight, then the sixth full moon from tonight is the next one. Then the sixth full moon after that is the next one, and then the sixth full moon after that. And that happens only about every roughly 500 years. But if you look at Stonehenge, because there's all these circles, and they would move rocks from one pit to another, and they would mark the solar and lunar cycles. And that's because when one branch of the Anunnaki would take over Stonehenge, they go, okay, we're on the solar calendar, and they'd fill in all the lunar holes. Then when they were on the lunar calendar, they'd dig new lunar holes and fill in the solar holes. But they learned through doing that every 19 years, the things repeat. So let's say you had a solar eclipse today at your house. You would know that it's not exactly 19 years. It's something like 19 years and 3.5 months or something. But anyway, whatever it is, you can look it up. The exact thing happens again. So you could be like a magician. You could go, well, you know, I don't like what you all are doing, so I'm going to create a total solar eclipse today. And you would have known that it happens every 19 years and 3 months or whatever it is.
Right.
And so that was a way of controlling people to know that.
Yeah, that's like the, what was it? We were talking about the locusts, the plagues, and things like that.
And I'm getting into that, believe you me.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, if you have... Oh, I think we lost him here. Let me get him back. Oh, I don't know what happened. It just cut right off. Get him back on here. Gordon,
what happened there? I didn't click anything. Did you?
No, I didn't click anything, and it just...
it's those NSA guys again, huh?
It just cut right off. I've never had that happen.
If there's anybody they don't want talking, it's me. And wait till I tell you some of the things that happened to me recently. So, anyway, if you go to the American Meteor Society, so I was saying, I hope you don't mind me giving the references to people so they can look this stuff up themselves, you know?
Please do.
I'm not making this stuff up. You go to the American Meteor Society, AMS, and they have the list of how many fireballs have hit the sky in every year, you know, going back. And a number of fireballs so far this year is like 1,000 of them. These are reported major burning objects coming in from the sky. And those are rocks out of the tail of Planet X. So there is stuff happening, even though, you know, a lot of people are like, well, there seems to be a huge lull. And, you know, what the heck is that all about? But anyway, so before pole shift actually happens, the tail is going to blot out the sun. There's going to be so much dust and gravel in the sky that the sun is going to be darkened. And looking through this red iron oxide dust that's ejected from Planet X because of their open rift volcanoes, and trails behind them in the tail, which is now because Planet X has stopped. It's just in between Planet X and the Earth, 5 million miles from Planet X towards the Earth. That's going to make the moon appear to be red, but that isn't going to be on the full moon. In other words, anytime you can see the moon, you're going to look at it and it's going to be blood red. Then you know you got pole shift happening at any time. Okay.
And when would we be expecting this to happen?
Well, I want to get into that too. Like, how long could pole shift take from the plagues all the way up to the actual event? And what's really interesting is that Egyptologists found a calcite pillar that was shattered. And for some reason the other day, recently, they decided to glue it back together. And calcite's very brittle, and it's also soft, so you can scratch it with your fingernail. But anyway, it was a live weather report from the apocalypse, from the last pole shift. Can you believe that, Michael? It was like a newspaper. Like if you went back to the middle of World War II and found a newspaper that was like live, you know, it's not a live report, but it, you know, it's at the time, it's current for that time. And this pillar describes how these falls of hail have stripped all the fruit off the trees, stripped all the leaves off the trees. The iron oxide has made the Nile flow red, and you can't even drink it because it's like sucking on a
technology. And you could tell the weather, or you know these things. I mean, my God, if I could go back right now, the things I could do. Just
right, cicadas. That's what you mean. The 17-year cycle of the cicadas,
yeah,
not locusts.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It'd be like time travel, and you go, well, I think I'm going to buy some IBM stock in 1955. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's, you could see, like, I remember I was telling a guy, I was using Windows 1, which was ridiculous. It was crashing every 2 minutes. And I had just gotten this astrology program to figure out where the positions of the planets were. And I called the guy up and I said, listen, this Windows is the coming thing, and you got to write your program to run on Windows. And he goes, no. And this was 1986. It was Windows 1. It was like, how many of your listeners even tried that or knew about it? You know. So I called him up, and he goes, no. I just spent 10 years writing it in DOS to run, you know, on IBM PCs. And I said, look, I'm telling you. Microsoft is the coming thing because it's going to mix pictures and text. That's perfect for astrology. You do a chart, and then you calculate the aspects. I said, it's perfect. Do you think I went out and bought one share of Microsoft stock? Not that I ever had any money to invest in the stock market, nor would I today. But do you think I bought even one share? Do you know what that would be worth today? Probably a new car.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, I was just talking about this the other night. If I could, I mean, imagine going back in time, and really all I'd need to bring with me maybe is a book of matches, a Bic lighter, and I don't know, hell, give me a cell phone.
Yeah,
and I probably could convince people that I have now captured their soul in this little device, and that they have to pay me to get it
Selfies.
back.
Selfies. So, but what I want to tell you is that what's referred to, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with this, the last book of the Bible is called Revelation, and in there are prophecies. And also there's another book that you can read online, and it's called the Colburn Bible. And that's a description written in ancient Egypt after the last pole shift that describes the next one. And it says the same thing that the last book in the Bible says, even though it's not the Bible. It's called the Colburn Bible, Kolbrin. The Colburn Bible just says the same thing that Revelation says, which is that the sun will be blotted out and the moon will appear blood red. Well, see, what I'm talking about tonight is the update on Planet X. And I've got some really exciting information, but the tail of Planet X, and Planet X is moving closer to the Earth. So instead of being like 34 million miles from Earth, now it's 30 million miles. And the tail is 5 million miles long, and it's streaming almost like a static electricity, electromagnetic thing, right towards the Earth. So that's why you have, if you go to the American Meteor Society, AM